but actually still a little bit cautious on the spending side. And also the fiscal stimulus, we know nobody can guarantee the fiscal stimulus will continue forever, and it won't. So I think I agree with you that the consumption in the U.S. is key. And I have to say you don't even have to, hopefully there will be no second wave, but I think even without that, I think there are underlying risks for U.S. consumption. The saving ratio has gone up, but that's actually not enough. There is a lot of, for us, the consumption in the U.S. is a big risk. And if you see even states where they have reopened early, there is no obvious evidence, clear evidence, that spending is back to normal levels. So I think we are cautious on that front.
Yeah, and yet we had Jamie Dimon saying earlier this week that the US consumer is in a better place than they were during 2008 to 2009. With your caution on the consumer, Luca, and what we've heard overnight from John Williams on the Fed thinking hard about yield curve control, does that give you more conviction in holding treasuries and US investment grade?
But the reason why we hold treasuries and investment grade is because in our multi-asset fund, of course, we need to have a portion of this money allocated to fixed income. And when we look around, it's difficult to see an alternative to U.S. bonds because, yes, they are expensive. I think there is no question about that, but they are still offering some kind of yield and some prospect of more kind of action by the Federal Reserve. So I think it's more like something that you need to have as a risk kind of control kind of things. I think for the yield curve control for the U.S., I think is going to happen. But again, it's going to happen. Why? Because the recovery is going to be pretty weak. They won't consider that if everything, is going well. I think there are some concern, and I think the yield curve control is one of them. I think they will prefer pretty much yield curve control, so capping bond yields, than going negative in terms of rates, which I think will create a lot of issues for the U.S., especially the money market industry.
Luca, let me turn your focus to Europe because it has been fascinating, this move towards joint debt issuance, really, and an almost transformative measure overnight, the sense that this is really a big key moment in the history of Europe. What's your take on it?
I think, in Europe we always have a lot of hope that finally there will be a breakthrough and everything will be great. I have to say that, for one, I believe that what has been proposed and discussed is a game changer. But it's a game changer if you look at the proposal. That Europe, all the decision process is incredibly long. We have to wait. A lot of things may happen in the meantime. But I have to say the fact that Germany has accepted the principle of effectively debt mutualization, I think is a massive change that was unthinkable just a few months ago. So I think from what I see, I'm very positive. I think that is a potentially a game changer. But again, we have seen this in the past many times. We get really kind of optimistic about something, and then there is a negative surprise. I think this time is different. And you already see the reaction of investors, which is very positive.
And Luca, let's get your reaction as an investor then, really briefly. If it goes through as it is, where would you put your money in Europe?
I think if you look at Europe, I think it's for us, we don't really do so much the kind of country allocation, because I think it's really based on sector preference. I think if this package goes through, I think everything that is related to the domestic demand, and especially in the periphery, I think would probably rate quite significantly. So probably this is the best place to
Luca, thank you so much. Luca Paolini there, Chief Strategist at Pictet Asset Management. This is Bloomberg.
Get your cook on with Asda, with rollbacks on our 227-gram Butcher's Selection sirloin steak, was £3.55, now only £2.85. And our 255-gram Butcher's Selection rump steak was £3.55, now just £2.75. Have a sizzling steak night. Thousands more rollbacks across the store. Asda. Selected stores subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
So I think the big news this morning, Matt, is around Beijing and lawmakers there, or the legislature at least, approving these new laws banning subversion, secession, terrorism and foreign interference for Hong Kong. So then, once they've decided on it in Beijing, it will then be promulgated basically in Hong Kong. So that's despite all the warnings.
Although imagine if they hadn't. Imagine if the NPC hadn't rubber-stamped the Communist Party proposal. Now, that would be news. Right?
Yes.
This is like, the big news today is that the sun rose in the east, you know?
It's still news for our listeners.
You're right. No, you're right. And we saw a little bit of reaction in markets, but really not too much because the NPC traditionally passes important Communist Party proposals. That's kind of the point of the NPC. So we did know this was coming, and yet, you're correct, it's still big news. It's still a red headline. We still saw a little bit of movement on equity indexes.
Yeah, the other big line, I think, is also just how well European equities are doing right now. They're up nearly 1% this morning. FTSE 100 gaining 0.7% of 1%.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so 4 days of gains for European equities. We're still down 15% year to date, but we've made up basically half the lost ground since the low in March. So that really is crucial. So, yeah, it's interesting that the easing of the lockdown, people feeling much more optimistic, it would seem, in the markets. And US markets also have been gaining strongly. And in fact, we're up by 0.3% on the S&P 500 E-mini futures now. The only thing that has been a little bit of concern, I guess, is, again, another spat between President Donald Trump and Twitter this time. Worries about what that might do to the tech-heavy NASDAQ. So we're down 0.1% on those futures. And in the bond markets this morning, I'll give you a check there of the numbers. So we trade at 68 basis points, absolutely flat on US 10-year yields. But it's a bit more interesting in Europe, where we have this package of measures being proposed by the Commission. 1.51% is where BTPs, Italian BTPs, stand a negative 41 basis points. So, some relief basically in the bond markets that this big support package could happen now.
Yeah, I mean, that's driven really amazing gains. Monday we were up 317 points on the DAX, and I thought, wow, that's, we're going to see a little bit of profit taking. Tuesday, we didn't. Another 113 points. Wednesday, another 153 points. Today, another 108 points. The DAX has risen over 700 points, or just about exactly 700 points this week. And that EU rescue package really adding to the optimism that we already had on the back of the Lufthansa bailout, the auto industry bailout, and obviously the Lufthansa bailout. We can say in parentheses there's a little news on that. Yeah. But all good news. And the Twitter spat, in the U.S., I think this is another one of those stories where it's dramatic, but it's not really. I mean, Twitter is only. Here in Europe, that would be huge. But in the U.S., only a $26 billion company. Yeah. That doesn't really compare with the $1 trillion likes of Google and Apple and the other mad giant mega techs. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of the European sort of story as well that you mentioned, I do want to say that this hour we've also got some great listening for you, because Brussels edition is coming to you in a moment with Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo. She's going to discuss that EU recovery plan. Got a couple of great guests, the economist and director of Bruegel, the think tank, and also the vice president of the European Greens is going to be joining us. So that's later on this hour.
Bruegel is always fascinating to hear from, especially now when you've got these so many sort of pro-European measures being passed. I wonder what chance the so-called Frugal Four have in derailing this package. I mean, we're talking about well over 2 trillion euros of stimulus that's anchored on this 750 billion euro plan. Merkel is behind it, Macron is behind it, but you've got Austria, Denmark, Sweden, and I think Norway, who are all, or the Netherlands, the Netherlands, who are all saying, hang tight for a second, that's a little bit too much in terms of joint borrowing, and we're not down with that. But those countries maybe can be persuaded, especially by the might of Angela Merkel. So you could see this sort of shift towards federalism in Europe that would be historical. And I can't wait to hear from Bruegel, because they're such amazing observers and analysts of European sort of international relations.
Yeah, which is often complex to understand given all the various players. Gunther Wolf is the man that we're going to be speaking to, the economist and director of Bruegel, the think tank in Brussels. So yeah, it'll be interesting to unpack with Maria exactly what all of that money is going to be used for. But we also have our guest for this hour.
Jane Foley's here.
Yeah.
She joined us on television earlier. She's the head of FX strategy at Rabobank, and we were talking about, I think, 3 main themes with you today, Jane. The good news for the euro, the bad news for the pound, and the who knows what to make of it for the UN. Let's start with the euro. How much optimism should we have, and how high could we see euro dollar go on this sort of federal turn?
Well, I mean, it is a piece of good news, certainly, but I think, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we know from just historical negotiations that the Europeans have a habit of bickering. There's a lot of horse trading, and this is 27 EU countries that do have to agree on this compromise. So all we have at the moment is a proposition, and certainly it is a good one, because given that it does have grants in there, then surely it should appease some of the issues that Italy, for instance, has about grants versus loans. But we also know that we do have at least 4 countries in the north of Europe that have to date been opposed to giving grants. So there is the possibility that a lot of the optimism that we have right now could be eroded away if there's an awful lot of horse trading in the next few months. But it remains to be seen. If they can get this compromise through relatively swiftly, well, certainly that does open the way for the euro. But we've got to say also that the outlook for euro dollar is, of course, also dependent on what the dollar does. And we've seen the dollar on various different indices push lower, and that is in relation to this risk-on move that we've got. We've got the dollar as a safe haven, and of course the stock markets push higher. Well, the dollar therefore loses some ground. So there's 2 different aspects here. We've got the euro issue, which has the capability of driving the euro, and we've got this general risk-on relationship that could also drive the dollar. And of course, even though risk-on is being thematic this week, we do have this deterioration in the relationship between the US and China, and that's got the capacity to worsen, I suppose, over the next few months, and therefore drive more safe haven flow into the dollar. So there's various different aspects which all could impact euro dollar here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, surely is about timing. I mean, 2 years for the EU just to begin the negotiation about the newest multi-year budget. This obviously worst recession in living memory, but how quickly can it be done? What is your view on sterling, though? Bank of England governor saying that the central bank is willing to do more to combat the virus fallout, but Brexit is also coming through as another, again, a resurgent risk for the pound. So how does the pound trade go forward? negotiations?
These certainly are linked. I mean, obviously, Brexit has been a headline piece of news, I think, for sterling over the last month or so again, because there hasn't been any real progress in the negotiations. And in fact, there's been a deterioration in the relationship, it seems, between the EU and the UK negotiators. That, of course, raises the prospect that the UK and the EU could be trading on WTO terms from the 1st of January next year. That raises the possibility of confusion at the borders and more paperwork, etc. Now, linked to that is the fact that might mean that the economic recovery that we see in the UK is worsened, that we might have the aspects of a recovery coming through by the end of the next year, and then we have more uncertainty related to Brexit. But another factor here is, of course, the fact that we have such a high mortality rate in the UK. We've already seen that is making teachers fearful about returning to work in the UK, about parents sending their children back to school in the UK. And this fear factor, we've seen the likes of Powell in the US talking about the fear factor. Surely that's going to be significant in a country like the UK, where you have this high mortality rate, and you also have a lack of confidence now in government policy surrounding the coronavirus. So this could also prolong a recovery, and that means that the Bank of England may have to take even more decisions about monetary stimulus, which means that at some point, perhaps later the year or maybe next year, a negative interest rate is a possibility, and that is not going to go away. Compare that perhaps to Australia, where they've had only around about 102 or 104 deaths, where you've seen now big queues in shopping centres, you see signs of personal spending going higher. I think that aspect in the UK is going to be much more flattened by fear, and that means that more monetary stimulus is certainly very likely.
Jane, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Jane Foley, Head of FX Strategy at Rabobank. Really good to get your views on the FX space this morning.
Let's get over to Leanne Gerrans now with your global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt, and thank you. Lawmakers in China have defied a threat by President Trump. They approved a proposal for sweeping national security legislation aimed at Hong Kong. Democracy advocates say the measure will curb essential freedoms in the city, and it could lead President Trump into imposing sanctions on China. Now, a grim milestone for the US. There have now been more than 100,000 deaths from the coronavirus, the world's highest death toll. It's been almost 3 months since the government announced the first fatality in the US. That happened on February the 29th in Washington state. Now, here in the UK, Boris Johnson has told MPs the focus needs to return to tackling coronavirus and not his aide's actions.
I think actually the best way to clarify the message, the best way for people to understand what we need to do next is for us all to move on.
The controversy has continued to grow over claims that his top advisor Dominic Cummings broke lockdown rules. The Prime Minister dismissed calls for a government investigation into Cummings' actions. But so far, around 40 Tory MPs have publicly demanded that Cummings be sacked. And in France, despite mounting opposition and fears of Big Brother-type surveillance, MPs in the lower house agreed to allow an app to track the coronavirus pandemic. Bloomberg's Anya Nussbaum has more.
The tracing app is named Stop COVID and should be available from Monday on a voluntary basis. It will notify users who happen to be around individuals who are COVID positive when they're within a distance of 1 meter and after 15 minutes of contact. It works with Bluetooth technology. Exposure will result in self-isolation, testing, and a GP visit. In Paris, Anya Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, there with all the world's national news. Now, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to bring you another Brussels edition special. This week, Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo discussing the EU's recovery plan, whether it truly is a game changer. She'll be joined by the director of Bruegel and the Vice President for the European Greens. That's coming up next, plus the markets, of course. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard?
or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Markets are taking the U.S. threat to revoke Hong Kong's special trading status in stride. Global markets have consistently shrugged off rising tensions between the U.S. and China that don't involve tariffs. But are investors being too complacent? Northern Trust Chief Investment Strategist Jim McDonald joins us from Chicago. After hours, we also saw the U.S. House now passing legislation that could impose sanctions on Chinese officials over human rights. That's already been passed by the Senate. But really, U.S. futures not reacting. Has most of the tensions between the U.S. and China already been priced in? I mean, this has been going on for years now.
So we do have a long-term theme called irreconcilable differences, which captures our view that the U.S. and China are not going to reach agreement on the significant differences between the two countries. And we're going to continue to see tensions build and maintain. It's important to note that these aren't tensions just between the U.S. and China. China has also got issues going on with Canada and with Australia. The regional aspect of what's going on with Hong Kong, I think right now, is being priced properly by the market. The U.S. has a risk of overreacting and pushing Hong Kong even further under China's direct wing.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Over in Europe, it's a risk-on day today. FTSE 100 is up 0.9%. The CAC 40 up more than 1% alongside the DAX as well. The Stock 600 is all sectors are in the green this morning. Travel and leisure is the biggest gainer, up 2.7%. This fresh friction we have between Beijing and Washington, really the markets are shrugging it off once again. In futures, though, although the S&P 500 and Dow are higher, NASDAQ futures are slipping a little bit in the red. This comes after a report that President Donald Trump is preparing to sign an executive order that could penalize tech companies for the way they moderate content on their sites. In the foreign exchange market, the euro dollar flat at 1.10 this morning after that euro relief news. And, of course, the British pound this morning for driving in London or anywhere in England and the UK, 1.22. And oil this morning under pressure. And this, of course, comes after that report we had yesterday. Crude inventory swelling for the first time in 3 weeks, reminiscent and reminder that potentially there still could be excess supply in the market. WTI trading under $32 a barrel today, down more than 3%. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garins on more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. China's relations with Canada have taken another blow. That's after Vancouver judge decided to continue proceedings against a top Huawei executive to extradite her to the U.S. Yesterday, the judge ruled that the case against the CFO, Meng Wanzhou, meets a key test of Canadian law known as double criminality. Now, China's reaction could be severe. In the weeks that followed her arrest back in 2018, officials in China jailed 2 Canadians and put 2 more on death row. In Germany, the Chancellor Angela Merkel is trying to rein in state leaders on loosening the lockdown. She is urging them to commit to social distancing rules and warning the coronavirus remains a risk even as infection rates do decline. Yesterday, the federal government and Germany's 16 states agreed to keep contact restrictions in place until the end of June. And SpaceX has postponed its historic NASA spaceflight until Saturday due to bad weather. The new timeline means Elon Musk's company will have to wait a few more days to launch 2 astronauts to the International Space Station. The voyage will be the first launch of American astronauts from the US since 2011. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jan Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
This is the Brussels edition, Bloomberg's briefing on what matters most in the European Union this week.
Well, welcome to this special episode of the Brussels edition. And this week we're talking about what could be a major turning point for Europe. After weeks of speculation, the European Commission has finally unveiled its recovery plan for Europe after the corona crisis. We're looking at a 1.1 trillion euro budget, but most crucially, it's a 750 billion recovery fund that could bring the European Union closer into becoming a real fiscal union. And to talk about this, I'm now joined by Guntram Wolf, who is an economist, and he's also director at the Bruegel think tank in Brussels. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm very excited to have you on now because I know that you've been working over 24 hours now, really crunching all of those numbers. And I'm wondering, was this recovery fund in line with what you were hoping to get? Is this better? Just how much of a wow moment is this for Europe, if at all?
Well, I think it's quite a wow moment in the sense that it's really unheard of that the EU and the Commission would really go out in the market and actually borrow several hundred billion, 500 or even 700 billion euros in the market and pay that back. We redeem that debt only in at the earliest 28, at the latest 58. So really 30, 40 years down the road. So this is really long-term debt, and that's really unheard of. That the European institutions take on such a major debt, unheard of long-term debt, and then use the money that is being raised in the markets to actually distribute most of it as grants to member states, to regions most in need. So it's quite a new moment.
And it's also, as you mentioned, worth noting that if the Commission does tap the markets, this is actually AAA bonds, which could be very attractive for investors. But I do wonder, when you look at this, is this that Hamilton moment that we were all waiting for, perhaps? Is this really taking Europe closer to a fiscal union? Do you think this is almost the first step to actually seeing at one point something like looks like maybe a free risk asset in Europe, a Corona bond, something that looks like that? Is that where it's headed?
Well, these are all very, very big words. A Hamiltonian moment. I think we are far away from a Hamiltonian moment. We do not have the treaty base, nor do we have the constitutional base in several member states to really go for a big Hamiltonian moment. But what it is really a temporary fiscal union. So I think what it really is economically, it is a response to a major shock, and the response to a major shock is done in the form of a temporary fiscal union, although of a small size. So in that sense, it's not a permanent transfer union that some fear and some hope for. It is really a temporary borrowing facility, but long-term debt.
And when you look at the breakdown in terms of the countries, it's clear that Italy and Spain would really benefit the most from this. There has been amounts already thrown out there, 80 billion euros, perhaps 70 billion euros, but you also need to factor in the contributions that they would make. So overall, how much money do you think in terms of those grants those two countries could get? What does a relief for the South look like?
Yeah, I mean, the precise numbers, of course, this is only proposal now, and the negotiations only start now, and not every number will stand the test. So there's still a lot of negotiations ongoing. But I'm positive in the sense that there was no full outright rejection even by any of the frugal four. So quite a bit of these numbers will actually pass. And the number we are talking about is here for a country like Italy. I think we are above 80 billion. That would be essentially transferred to Italy over the next few years. So this is actually quite a sizable number, and helps Italy, deal and fend off some of the big drop in GDP and the big fiscal implications that this coronavirus has had on them. Of course, national borrowing will remain the key and will remain absolutely essential. And that's why I expect actually the ECB to continue to stay in the sovereign bond markets, because without that, sovereign bond markets might dry up. And so it's extremely important that we combine monetary fiscal policy, and the fiscal policy is now has, in addition to the national fiscal policy, has now the European level borrowing, which is, I think, a positive sign.
And just to pick up on that, the market, of course, is already almost really fully priced in that the European Central Bank will have to increase the size of the PEP program. But I did want to touch on one thing that you said, which is the fact that there was no outright rejection to this proposal from the countries that are usually very fiscally conservative. I find very interesting that Mark Rutte has gone so quiet. What do you think is prompting this change in the frugal fours? Is this because they got a lot of heat in the language, perhaps over the language that they used at the start of the crisis, I should say? What is it that's changing this?
Well, I think one big factor is certainly that Germany's Conservative Party has shifted its position, and so this is, of course, extremely powerful and extremely important. But then I think it's also true that a country like the Netherlands knows that they need a functioning single market, they need a functioning European Union for their own economy, and they've also realized that some of the more belligerent rhetoric was actually backfiring. So I think a lot is happening now in a much more diplomatic way. And I have to say also some points that the Dutch are making are really important points. I mean, the fact that joint borrowing means actually some serious control about how the money is being spent, and making sure that the money is spent in a good way and not in a bad way, in order to modernize our economy.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
At Moonpig, we've got making people happy down to a science. How? With flowers. Research shows that whether small blossoms or giant blooms, roses or peonies, receiving bouquets of any formation causes our bodies to produce endorphins, or the happy chemical. Thank you, Professor. And you too can harness the power of flowers with Moonpig. It's easy. Send a beautiful hand-tied bouquet of happiness straight from our app with just a couple of taps. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1951, after going 0 for 12, Major League Baseball legend Willie Mays connects for his first Major League home run.
There's a drive to left. It's well hit. Way back and gone. Willie Mays with his first home run of the year.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You know this perfectly well. A lot of debate over the past few months about whether or not his European agenda was losing steam, that their relationship with Angela Merkel was broken. What does it mean for Macron now if this is actually successful?
Well, I think for Emmanuel Macron it was extremely important to finally get something done together with the Chancellor. I think he's been trying, and last year's attempt really went nowhere. Now he has succeeded in really doing something together with Germany, and that's certainly a big plus for him. But of course, if you look at his poll ratings, I mean, he's really not doing very well. I mean, the German Chancellor stands at 80% popularity in the German population, something like this, 75 perhaps, and Emmanuel Macron is around 40. So I think really in the French context, the politics have become very, very difficult, and a lot of people in France are already starting to think about the presidential elections in 22, actually. So this is, I mean, it's politically actually a very, very complicated moment for France, but I think certainly this deal is something positive also for France and for the current president.
Right, so Macron needed a victory, and he may just get that this time. Well, Guntram Wolf, who is economist and director of Bruegel, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And now that we've talked about the policy, let's look into the politics, because this looks even more complicated. So I'm now joined by Ernest Urtasun, who is the Vice President for the European Greens, and he sits on the Budget Committee at the European Parliament. I know you follow this very, very closely, so I'm happy to speak to you today because I have many questions to you. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much for calling.
So I just wanted to ask you, you had been for a while saying Ursula von der Leyen needs to go all out here. She needs to spend trillions, and the only way the European Parliament is going to agree to this is if we actually do see real money from von der Leyen. I'm just curious, are you happy with von der Leyen? Do you think a lot will be forgiven now? The fact that she was so slow to react to this crisis, has she made up for it?
The Parliament has been calling now for a while for a strong recovery fund. Of course, ECB asked for 1.5 trillion, and we, the Parliament, asked also for something around $1 trillion, so this falls short of what we asked for. But still, I think it's a positive step forward, particularly because we saw some weeks ago the leaks of the first proposals of the Commission, particularly because we saw some weeks ago the leaks of the first proposals of the Commission that were below that figure, and we're also playing with multipliers that are totally I think that the pressure that we made from of course the deal between France and Germany helped in getting to that figure that we have at the moment.
And we are having some technical issue. Let's just go back to Matt and Caroline in the studio while we try to solve this. Guys?
Yeah, it sounds like the line just cracking up a little bit there. Not a big deal. That happens all the time, but especially during these coronavirus times as everybody is meant to call in on the phone. Let's just get a quick check, Caroline, on what's going on in markets right now. We still have gains across European equity indexes, so there still is real sense of optimism here, as you were saying, 4 days in a row of a risk-on mood.
Yeah, and as Maria was getting to the bottom of with her guests over in Brussels, the importance of this European recovery fund. Yes, it may pale in comparison to the size of the European economy, but nonetheless, it's very important for investors that actually Europe is doing as much as possible to support the economic revival as we unwind the lockdown. So the Euro Stoxx 600 up by 0.9%. 100 not doing quite so well, gaining 0.6%. Xetra DAX up 0.6 also. In terms of the big movers this morning, Salvatore Ferragamo bringing back a former CEO, so that gains almost 12%. That's sort of part of the luxury story, I would argue, that has done particularly well as the big shopping destinations begin to open up. So that's a big mover. Ryanair also up by 1.6% again, and EasyJet up by 5.5%. Another story this week from Europe has been the rebound in very, very hard hit airline leisure stocks that we've seen. And then also in terms of the bond markets this morning, we trade at 1.5% for Italian BTPs. So that's kind of the reaction for Italian BTPs has been yields basically coming down a little bit, 1.5% for the 10-year, and that really is the good news that you see from that kind of recovery fund that's being proposed. Still just a proposal.
When I was a kid and living in London, one of the greatest things that I ever got was an unlimited movie pass. Oh. So I lived, right on the Fulham Road, and there was a Cineworld there, and I got an unlimited movie. Me and my buddy got unlimited movie passes, and we could go to as many movies as we liked. And it was only like 20 quid a month, I think. And we went to every single movie, right? Yeah, I'm super into the cinema. I still am. But that's one of the industries that's gotten absolutely destroyed, right, during this lockdown. And I don't know how it's going to open back up, but I was just looking at the Stock 600. The biggest winner right now is Cineworld, up 23%.
Yeah, well, look, it's all about social distancing, and here in the UK, we've been given this 2-metre rule, and the government's actually asked its scientists to look at whether that could be cut to go along with the World Health Organization rule, which is a metre distance to try to prevent coronavirus. But you're right. I mean, any cultural event, group activity, just in real significant difficulties, because we don't really know when it's going to be fully up and running. But also some other big headlines out of China this morning that we should tell listeners about. You can follow it all on our T-Live blog, of course. This is China's premier giving his press conference, Li Keqiang, at the closing of the National People's Congress. It is largely symbolic, but it is China's version of a legislation. Li talking about China and the GDP growth target, which they dropped for 2020, that they are looking for economic growth in 2020, even though they don't have a numerical target, which was a first for a long time. Job creation is a high priority. We've heard a lot about that, Matt, haven't we, in terms of creating jobs because of the pandemic and how hard it hit China, but also because of social stability and so on. It's interesting that they've switched the focus from purely a GDP and growth target to a broader economic and employment target, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very important because the Communist Party takes all of its power from, I guess, the support of the people, right? So if they have serious unemployment issues, if they don't continue to bring people out of poverty at the amazing pace that they have thus far, then they weaken and their control is diminished. So there's a lot going on in terms of big news headlines. It doesn't all seem to be affecting the price action, though, because we do see some really optimistic price action here and some worrying developments in China concerning their relationship with the U.S. We'll continue to cover this for you right now. I want to get over to Leanne Guerin. She's got your other global news headlines. Leanne?
Matt, thank you very much. And as you guys were mentioning, President Trump now faces a tough choice on China. Lawmakers there have approved a proposal for sweeping national security legislation aimed at Hong Kong. Pro-democracy advocates say it will limit essential freedoms in the city. The president had already threatened to respond strongly to the move. He could do anything from sanctioning Chinese officials to revoking Hong Kong's special trade status with the U.S. Meanwhile, today the government is launching a test and trace system here in the UK. It's aimed at allowing the country's economy to restart while suppressing the spread of coronavirus. The Prime Minister says the programme is key to lifting the lockdown.
It will be on a very small minority of the population, a very, very small minority of the population. And I would just say to everybody that it's worth it, because that is the way that other countries, that is the tool that other countries have used to unlock the prison.
Anyone in England who's been in contact with someone with coronavirus will be asked to self-isolate for 14 days. Affected people will be sent an email or a text. But the mobile phone tracing app, which went on trial on the Isle of Wight, it isn't ready yet. Meanwhile, today, the government, apologies for that. Now, Moscow is planning to ease its lockdown imposed since the end of March as new coronavirus cases in Russia continue to fall. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer says this comes after President Putin declared the country had passed the peak of the pandemic.
Inhabitants of the Russian capital will be allowed to take walks from June 1st, though with certain restrictions. Retailers in Moscow and some services such as dry cleaners and repair shops will also be allowed to open. The remaining restrictions will be lifted after June 14th. In Moscow, Henry Mayer, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
And secret clinics illegally treating foreigners with coronavirus are on the rise in the Philippines, prompting a government crackdown. Bloomberg's Andrea Calonzo has more.
Investigators and immigration officials are tracking down these underground clinics. Police raided this week a clandestine clinic in the business district and arrested 2 Chinese nationals. Authorities also earlier located a similar clinic north of Manila, allegedly treating COVID-19 patients. In Manila, Andrea Calonzo, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Leanne Guerins. This is Bloomberg.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The Boston Symphony Orchestra presents BSO at Home. While you stay inside, enjoy a curated collection of archived concerts and behind-the-scenes stories from BSO musicians. BSO Homeschool provides lessons for music lovers of all ages. New performances and messages from musicians are added regularly. Enjoy these selections and much more at bso.org/at-home.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Right now, we're all depending on the digital world that little bit more. And Barclays Digital Eagles are here to help everyone develop the skills they need. From T&Teach, supporting those who are new online, to Code Playground, teaching kids how to code. Since 2013, we've been helping everyone develop digital skills. And now more than ever, we're here to help. To find out more, search Digital Eagles. Barclays, we're working to make money work for you.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Thanks to National Lottery players, the Help a Squaddy initiative are now providing mental health support online for veterans like Darren.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids. Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
This is a message from the RNLI and Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Beach lifeguards can't be everywhere this summer, so they can't always protect your family, but you can. So keep an eye on your loved ones. Avoid taking risks in the sea. Don't use inflatables. In an emergency, dial 999 for the Coast Guard. Get more advice at rnli.org/beach2020. Thank you.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning. From Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Good Thursday morning. European equities are on the front foot. The stock 600 up more than 1%. U.S. futures, at least the S&P 500, are pointing to a higher start in New York. So overall markets seem to be shrugging off the recent escalation of tensions between Washington and Beijing. We did have China approve that new national security legislation regarding Hong Kong. A lot of questions on what that means for the special relationship status. NASDAQ futures, though, under a little bit of pressure, down 0.2% on a report. President Trump is preparing to sign an executive order that could penalize tech giants. So just quickly, in pre-market trading, I am seeing Facebook down more than 1%, as well as Twitter down 2.9%. Those technology companies. Over in the Foreign exchange market, euro dollar, 1.09 this morning, slightly weaker against the U.S. dollar. And cable this morning trading at 1.22. And then we are seeing weakness in the oil market. WTI crude, $31.77. Brent crude, $33.81. Both those contracts are down pretty handsomely this morning. This comes as a U.S. report showing those crude inventories swelled for the first time in 3 weeks. So a bit of a hiccup on what everyone is thinking is stabilized market, raising concerns of more supply in the market. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins. I'm more what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. Donald Trump will sign an executive order on social media firms today, following threats to shut down platforms he accused of stifling conservative voices. The president reacted angrily after Twitter added fact-check warnings to some of his tweets. But Facebook's chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, warned censoring a website would not be the right flex for a government worried about censorship. Now, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is asking the UK to move on from the controversy over his top aide Dominic Cummings. Johnson has rejected calls from his own party to fire Cummings. The advisor travelled 260 miles to seek childcare support from family at a time when the country was in lockdown. And finally, Disney is taking baby steps to reopen its parks. CEO Bob Chapek is planning to be more cautious than other theme park operators in reopening attractions. He told Bloomberg he wants to take extra time to build trust with customers. The company aims to start allowing guests back in its parks in Florida in mid-July. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Have you ever been to Disney World, Leanne?
I've never even been to America, Matt. Me not Disney World. I thought you knew that.
I am shocked.
I know. It's terrible. And I was actually
you
just
are at
looking
least 21, 22 years old. Why have you not been to the United States of America? That's more important than Disney.
You know what? I have no idea. Well, obviously, I didn't grow up in the UK. I grew up in Africa, and I thought the UK was very, very exotic. But now I think America is extremely exotic, and I've never been.
Well, I think you would like it. You should go to California ASAP.
People say I'll never come back. That's what scares me.
It's very likely, but you'll be happy. Leanne, thanks so much for that. Leanne Garrins there with your global news headlines. Let's get over to Nathan Hager right now, who is also far from California. You've been to America, but you're on the other side of the country from the West Coast.
Absolutely.
What's going on in there in the heart of it all?
Well, we've been working toward this milestone, and so we're starting with the difficult news that can't be ignored this morning. 100,000 dead in this country from coronavirus. And as sobering as that is, markets are trying to focus on the positive. The rate of infection is slowing. Economies are reopening. Now, though, there's the headwind of fever pitch tensions with China this morning. That bill cracking down on security in Hong Kong has passed. Now the U.S. is left with a range of options to respond. We're going to get insights on how all this could affect the economic recovery from David Rosenberg at Rosenberg Research. Also, Tom Porcelli, chief U.S. economist at RBC Capital, will be with us this morning. On top of all that, we're seeing NASDAQ futures fall a bit of risk aversion now with President Trump threatening to crack down on social media. We'll have details on the executive order he's planning to sign today as Karen Moscow and I get set for Bloomberg Daybreak in the U.S. Matt.
I say David Rosenberg was one of my favorite, when I was in the U.S., one of my favorite guests to interview. He's just got this, he has the ability to look through the data without emotion and take out of it, the cold hard facts. So I'm very much looking forward to that. One of the most famous bears, I think, in existence. You've got David Rosenberg, you've got Nouriel Roubini, you've got David Tice, maybe Gary Schilling. I guess
it'll be interesting to see what he thinks about this divergence we're seeing between the market optimism and the likelihood that it's going to be a slow recovery from this massive shutdown we've been through over the last couple of months here.
Yes, likely, but we hope not.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
How great would it be to have a surprise of an amazingly fast and strong recovery?
That's what Jamie Dimon's looking for, right?
Yeah, and Jim Bullard, too. All right, Nathan, thanks very much. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow coming up then with Rosie in just a little bit if you're listening on Sirius XM Channel 119. If you're tuned in on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Well, let's talk a bit about that discrepancy, if you want to see it that way, of the stock market really looking for the recovery, the economic recovery, and weighing US-China tensions also. Ben Laidlaw is our guest this hour, CEO of Tower Hudson Research. Really good to speak to you. You see actually three drivers for the recovery going forwards. How optimistic are you, that perhaps it can be swift in the US and in Europe?
Yeah, well, reasonably so, right? I mean, markets clearly forward-looking. They're very focused on the sort of incremental data point. And I think, the three that we're really flagging here is the rebound in activity. Our sort of composite global activity sort of index is up 50% from the trough. It's still down 40%. But again, that incremental movement is clearly up. You look at restrictions that governments have, these lockdowns globally. You look at the top 15 economies globally, those restrictions have been eased by sort of 10%, but they're still very tight. That sort of index is, at 70, 80 was the peak. But, again, direction of travel is, we're loosening things off. And the other one is the sort of hopeful vaccine. And I think the news flow is going to stay very positive there. You have 140 vaccines in development globally. We've seen a handful of those in human trials right now, and we're beginning to get sort of some positive news. So I think, those are the three sort of data points I think the markets are focused on, and it's the incremental data point. The markets are forward-looking. They're looking at the sort of relative improvement of, obviously a very distressed level.
Yeah, vaccines and testing, those two hand in hand, certainly going to help in the recovery. The economies around the world are lifting at a slightly different pace, though, and of course the stimulus injections or the recovery packages are varying in size as well. Ben, where do you think your best bets are placed for a great recovery?
Yeah, so we're running a sort of barbell, right? I mean, we're not completely unrealistic. There's, we're coming off a very low level. There's a lot of risk still out there. So on the one hand, I would still have that core in the portfolio of those sort of quality growth, sort of tech and healthcare names. I think they come out of this crisis sort of stronger than they went in. I don't find valuations demanding at all, given the, the level of profitability, the balance sheets, et cetera, et cetera. But, I do think, given that we do think that incremental data point is going to keep being positive, you need to be looking at the cyclicals here. And the market's clearly beginning to have a rotation. So, you need to pick your bets carefully. I mean, we like small cap, we like real estate, we like financials in Europe. We recently upgraded energy. I think the risk reward for all of those sort of makes some sense. I guess the one big cyclical sector we're a bit more cautious on is sort of financials, especially in the US. But I do think you need to be adding sort of select cyclicals to your portfolio here, and beginning to look outside the US. Ex-US markets have really lagged. Europe in particular, and I do think these sort of baby steps towards fiscal federalism and the recovery fund, could potentially be a real shot in the arm here with a stronger euro, lower spreads, really helping some of these domestic European sectors, such as financials, which is probably the close to being the cheapest, most unloved sector globally right now.
Yeah, I mean that would be a help, wouldn't it? Look, what about ESG? That's the other big theme out of this crisis.
Yeah, I think so. And I think this is, ESG is having a sort of, quote unquote, good first crisis, right? It's, since it sort of went mainstream over the last couple of years, you've seen sort of ESG funds, really outperform in the crisis, obviously helped by the fact that they own a lot of sort of tech stocks and they're underweight sort of things like commodities and materials. But that's really helped. You've seen, in the context of very significant outflows from broader equity funds, you've seen pretty meaningful inflows into ESG funds. And, I think some of these sort of, this is obviously at a sort of meta level of sort of ESG-driven crisis, a lot of social issues there, a lot of sort of environmental issues. So, I would make the point that this is sort of the coming of age or the stress testing, if you like, of ESG. I think it's a theme. Again, it's similar to what I was saying about tech earlier, coming out of this crisis stronger than went in. I think the same can be said for some of these ESG themes.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Ben Laidler, who is the CEO of Tower Hudson Research here on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Airbags to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, May 28th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
The U.S. hits a grim milestone as coronavirus deaths pass 100,000.
President Trump escalates his fight with Twitter, aiming an executive order at social media companies.
And U.S. tensions with China reach a fever pitch as Beijing approves sweeping national security laws targeting Hong Kong.
New York Governor Cuomo tells Washington to stop abusing New York. Plus, New Jersey says it's well past the peak of the virus outbreak. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The NBA weighing different playoff formats at a return, while baseball players have reacted negatively to the proposal made by owners for a pay reduction for the shortened season.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS.
And U.S. futures are mixed this morning after the S&P 500 hit an 11-week high. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are now little changed. Dow futures up 101. NASDAQ futures down 32. The DAX in Germany is up 0.5%. CAC in Paris up 0.8%, and the FTSE 100 up 0.6%. Nikkei 225 in Japan jumped 2.3%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was down 0.7%. 10-year Treasury little change, yield 0.68%. Yield on the 2-year 0.17%. NYMEX crude oil down 2.7% on 88 cents at $31.92 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.5% or $9.10 at $17.35.90 an ounce. The euro 1.0997 against the dollar. The yen 107.80. Nathan.
Karen, we begin with a grim milestone in the coronavirus outbreak. U.S. deaths have now passed 100,000. For more, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. The United States has this unenviable 100,000 mark, the highest in the world. Infections of the U.S. are more than 4 times higher than any other country, coming in at more than 1.6 million. Still, optimism for a vaccine is gathering steam. Dr. Anthony Fauci says efforts could yield results before the end of the year.
I still think we have a good chance, if all the things fall in the right place, that we might have a vaccine that would be deployable by the end of the year.
The rise in U.S. infections continues to slow. The latest count of daily cases rose 1.2%, below last week's average of 1.4%. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. NASDAQ futures are in the red this morning after word that President Trump plans to escalate his fight with Twitter. He's taken exception to the company's new fact-checking feature and is poised to act as soon as today. For the very latest, we bring in Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. Good morning, Anne-Marie.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. President Trump is preparing an executive order that could bring lawsuits down on Twitter, Facebook, and other tech companies. A draft of the order obtained by Bloomberg shows it would have the government reduce liability protections the social networks currently have for third-party posts. Now, the order could allow users to sue Twitter, Facebook, and others for taking down posts if those posts meet certain criteria. The move comes after Twitter fact-checked an unsubstantiated claim by the president on mail-in voting. So far, the White House is declining to comment. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you. Meantime, tensions between the U.S. and China are nearing a fever pitch. This morning, Chinese lawmakers approved sweeping national security legislation targeting Hong Kong. Democracy advocates say it will curb essential freedoms in the city. The move also risks a strong response from the White House. Bloomberg's Selena Wang joins us from Beijing with the latest on the significance of this vote.
That's right. China has approved this proposal for the new national security law, which of course comes as no surprise. This resolution will then be forwarded to the National People's Congress Standing Committee, which will actually draft the details. So it could still be another few months from now when we finally get the details of what these laws are going to look like that are going to ban subversion, secession, terrorism, and foreign interference. But likely this law could be passed by June or August.
And Selena, this move from China risks a variety of responses from the Trump administration. Tell us the range of outcomes that we could see on that front.
They could include financial sanctions, visa restrictions, export controls, and possibly even revoking Hong Kong's special trading status with the U.S. So the U.S. has a really delicate line to walk here about sending a strong message to Beijing while also not hurting Hong Kong people, businesses, and U.S. businesses operating in Hong Kong. Now, when it comes to China's response, they've reiterated that they could take countermeasures, that this is foreign meddling in an internal affair, and they've also tried to allay fears that this national security law would fundamentally change the freedoms and judicial independence of Hong Kong. But that really hasn't allayed the concerns of the business community in Hong Kong, which have issued quite strong statements saying that this is fundamentally the end of the one country, two systems rule.
All right, Bloomberg's Selena Wang reporting for us from Beijing this morning. Thank you, Selena. This move from China also comes on the heels of the U.S. House passing a bill allowing sanctions on Chinese officials for human rights abuses against Muslims. Add that to the Hong Kong legislation, disputes over the coronavirus outbreak, plus long-term concerns on trade, and tensions between the U.S. and China appear to be reaching record levels.
And there's also the issue of Huawei. The company's chief financial officer failed to block her extradition to the U.S. after a Canadian judge ruled the proceedings will continue. Bloomberg's Natalie Obiko-Pearson has more from Vancouver.
This was really a key test, an early chance for Meng Wanzhou to have this case thrown out. Essentially, what was at the crux of the matter was a principle called double criminality that has to be met in order for Canada to consider extradition. Meng had tried to have it thrown out, arguing that this didn't meet that requirement. The judge disagreed with her, and so that means she remains under house arrest and that the proceedings will continue.
Meng Wanzhou has emerged as a high-profile target in the U.S. effort to contain China and Huawei, which Washington sees as a national security threat. She's been charged with conspiring to defraud banks by conducting transactions that violated U.S. sanctions on Iran.
Well, the question now is just how bad things could get between the U.S. and China. So far, investors have taken it in stride, pushing global stocks to the highest level since March. Still, there are signs of stress. China's yuan tested a record low in yesterday's offshore trading, while Hong Kong's equity market is valued at its most depressed level relative to global shares since the 1998 Asian financial crisis. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. And at 5:07 on Wall Street, we bring in Michael Barr for a check of what else is going on around the world this morning. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says Washington needs to stop abusing states hit hardest by the coronavirus. The governor says New York pays more to the federal government than any other state, and there are many states that take more money from the government than it contributes.
The conservatives want to argue against redistribution of wealth. Why should you take money from the rich and give it to the poor? That's exactly what you are doing. That is exactly what you have done every year.
Cuomo met with President Trump in Washington to lobby for federal funding. Governor Phil Murphy says New Jersey is now well past the peak of the outbreak and will continue the reopening process in the state.
The reason we've been able to get to this point is because we have made building out our testing capacity a key priority. As of today, there are now 164 sites, both publicly and privately operated, up and running across the state.
Murphy says, though, there are still many people in hospitals being treated for COVID-19. There were another 148 new virus-related deaths in the state. In Connecticut, the total number of COVID-19 cases declined on Wednesday. The State Department of Public Health says there were 34 new deaths. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont, speaking to Bloomberg Radio, talked about his priority when businesses want to reopen in his state.
Public health. That's number 1, 2, and 3 for me in priorities. You're right. They're taking a hit. The state takes a small hit, but that's secondary to doing everything we can from a public health point of view to slow things down just a little bit longer. We found out that 2 weeks is an eternity in COVID years, right? It really can make a difference. So give us another 2 or 3 weeks.
Protests over the death of a black man in police custody broke out in Minneapolis for a second straight night, with demonstrators in a standoff with officers outside a police precinct and looting of nearby stores. One person was killed Wednesday in what police are calling a homicide. Meanwhile, Mayor Jacob Fry is calling for criminal charges against a white officer who pinned George Floyd to the ground with his knee. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. This red headline just crossed the Bloomberg terminal. The Trump administration reportedly plans to cancel the visas of thousands of Chinese graduate students and researchers with direct ties to universities tied to the military in China. That is, according to the New York Times, citing U.S. officials with knowledge of the discussions. It's coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashower.
Good morning, Nathan. As of now, baseball in 2020 in serious danger of not happening. Reaction to the proposal made by MLB owners to players, not good. Max Scherzer, the Washington Ace, is on the union executive committee, tweeted last night, the players are simply not going to accept the deal where their pay is reduced more than what had already been agreed to, and Scherzer, as a high-paid guy, would see his pay come way down. The NBA and NHL are in a better position because their players have already gotten paid for the bulk of the regular season. So they're moving on. We heard about the NHL's plan for a 2014 playoff. The NBA said to be weighing several playoff scenarios, including a World Cup soccer-like plan where there would be 5 or 6 groups of 4 teams. They would do round-robin games, and 2 would advance from each group to a more typical playoff bracket. The Nets' Spencer Dinwiddie was on ESPN.
We actually don't know too much more than the general public right now. Adam Silver is, doing his thing as commissioner and relaying the messages, and Michelle Roberts, as our union president, is doing her thing as well. So we're just kind of playing it by ear. We did open up the practice facility, but it's not mandatory that we go back to New York as of this moment right now. And so we're just continuing our training and trying to stay as ready as possible.
Of course, the Nets eyeing next season when Kevin Durant returns from his leg injury to join Kyrie Irving. There have been rumors Brooklyn's going to try and acquire Bradley Beal from Washington. Beal averaged 30 points a game before the shutdown. New Knicks president Leon Rose just made 3 hires to his front office. Tom Thibodeau, the former Chicago and Minnesota coach, has emerged as the clear favorite to become the Knicks' next coach. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures higher by 5 points. Dow futures up 135. NASDAQ futures down 15 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers. This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Markets are taking the U.S. threat to revoke Hong Kong's special trading status in stride. Global markets have consistently shrugged off rising tensions between the U.S. and China that don't involve tariffs. But are investors being too complacent? Northern Trust Chief Investment Strategist Jim McDonald joins us from Chicago. After hours, we also saw the U.S. House now passing legislation that could impose sanctions on Chinese officials over human rights. That's already been passed by the Senate. But really, U.S. futures not reacting. Has most of the tensions between the U.S. and China already been priced in? I mean, this has been going on for years now.
So we do have a long-term theme called irreconcilable differences, which captures our view that the U.S. and China are not going to reach agreement on the significant differences between the two countries. And we're going to continue to see tensions build and maintain. It's important to note that these aren't tensions just between the U.S. and China. China has also got issues going on with Canada and with Australia. The regional aspect of what's going on with Hong Kong, I think right now, is being priced properly by the market. the U.S. has a risk of overreacting and pushing Hong Kong even further under China's direct wing.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are climbing while U.S. stock index futures are mixed as investors weigh fresh fiscal stimulus from the European Union against increased friction between the U.S. and China. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures are up 8 points. Dow futures up 166. NASDAQ futures are down 10. The DAX in Germany is up 0.8%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.17%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.2%, down 41 cents at $32.41 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.5% or $9 at $17.35.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1013 against the dollar. British pound 1.2278 and the yen 107.76. Today we get another reading on first quarter GDP out at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with durable goods orders and the weekly report on initial jobless claims. At 9:45 it's a Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index and at 10 pending home sales. And economic sentiment in the euro area rose from a record low after companies started to reopen across the continent following the easing of pandemic restrictions. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The number of dead Americans from coronavirus has topped 100,000. More in this live report from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
And, Michael, that is the highest death toll in the world from the pandemic. The milestone comes 126 days since the first case and 87 days since the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced the country's first fatality in late February in Washington state. Meantime, Anthony Fauci, the U.S. government's top infectious disease expert, said there's a good chance a vaccine may be deployable by November or December. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, John. The Texas Supreme Court rejected a bid by voting rights activists to expand access to mail-in ballots for state residents who fear they will contract COVID-19 if they go to the polls in person. Yesterday's launch of the SpaceX Crew was postponed due to bad weather. NASA and SpaceX will try again on Saturday. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks for coming up to 520 on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. Markets, for the most part, appear to be looking past worsening tensions between the U.S. and China, but what could they mean for the global recovery from the coronavirus shutdowns? For more, we're joined by David Rosenberg, chief economist and strategist at Rosenberg Research. It's good to talk with you this morning, David. Thanks so much. Of course, China has just passed that national security legislation targeting Hong Kong, and now there's this report in the New York Times that the U.S. could expel Chinese graduate students with ties to Chinese military schools. Do you see these tensions potentially affecting the recovery?
Well, I think that there's a chance that it could. I just have to tell you that, you know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And we've been seeing the U.S. and China relations deteriorate rather markedly even before this. And yet the market just seems to be turning the other way. These, you know, when you go back a year ago, you know, if we didn't hear about how phase one was going with the trade talks, the market would go down. That's why the president kept on talking about success in phase one was to get the animal spirits up. And here we have a situation where this was last year, and we had this sort of situation even before what's happened with Hong Kong, just in the past week or two, and with all the blame game and everything else. The market last year would have been tumbling on this news. But it's ignoring it, because the only thing that matters for the market right now is not even so much the economic data, and it's not so much what's happening geopolitically. These are clear negatives for market sentiment. But there's only one thing dominating investors right now, and it's the vaccine. You know, since April 17th, we've had 4 days when there was some exciting major market-moving news over a vaccine or treatment, and I'm starting with Gilead back well over a month ago, and then, of course, with Novavax just the other day. It's been actually incredible that on days when you get something exciting on whether it's first or second trial, the Dow has rallied on those 4 days in the past month and change by 3,000 points. That's all that matters right now. It's about vaccine or treatment, and it's about the reopening of the economy. And everything else is just basically tied for second on the list of what investors are focused on.
Well, there could be some focus later this morning when we get the latest round of weekly jobless claims. We've seen a downward trend in the numbers since the peak a few weeks back. Do you think we've hit a trough when it comes to job losses after this, after all the shutdowns?
Well, I think that there's no doubt that the detonation impact is definitely behind us, and I would expect that we're going to start to see some leveling off at lower levels on the claims numbers. And that's going to be interesting to see whether the benefits get extended or not past July. That'll be interesting. And obviously have other impacts either on the labor market or maybe that alone is a possible fiscal cliff alongside what's happening with the state and local government level right now. But again, what's interesting is that when you speak to most equity market participants, they'll tell you, well, getting to 2 million in claims, which of course is a horrible number, is well below the 6 million in claims. So the markets are taking second derivatives and looking at these sequential improvements or what are just basically less bad numbers and saying, well, that's actually a parting of the clouds. I actually find it once again incredible that through this whole thing, the best days for the Dow. I mean, I mentioned before about how the markets responded to news on vaccines or treatments. Outside of that, the best days for the market, believe it or not, the best days for the market in the past couple of months have been jobless claim Thursdays, which is incredible when you consider we're up to almost like 40 million of job losses and the market is absolutely ripped. Which really shows you the disconnect here between Wall Street and Main Street. And I guess a lot of it has to do not just with what's happening in terms of all these hopes for a vaccine and Anthony Fauci's comments yesterday that we could see one November, December. That obviously would be a game changer. There's so much liquidity in the system, and it has to flow somewhere, and that's the bottom line.
Or we'll leave it there then. David Rosenberg, thank you so much for your insights this morning. Really appreciate it. David Rosenberg is chief economist and strategist at Rosenberg Research. Again, we do get those weekly jobless claims figures from the Labor Department at 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time. Ahead of that, mixed action in the futures markets. S&P futures are up almost 8 points now. Dow futures up 165. NASDAQ futures are down by 12 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The demand picture for airlines may be getting a little better, but it won't save thousands of jobs at American. American Airlines plans to cut its management and administrative staff by nearly a third, more than 5,000 people. The airline says it'll accept volunteers to take buyouts through June 10th and then make forced cuts if there aren't enough. Employees will stay on the payroll through September 30th. That's when government aid requiring no layoffs runs out. American isn't alone, though. Boeing is going to cut more than 12,000 U.S. jobs with nearly 6,700 layoffs. Boeing says, too, that's not all. Several thousand more will take place in coming months. It's not saying where. Job cuts in state and local governments could keep the total number of first-time unemployment claims above the 2 million mark for a 10th straight week. We'll find that out later this morning. And stock futures are mostly higher, even with increased tensions with China over Hong Kong. S&P futures up 4, NASDAQ futures down 19, but Dow futures up 127 points. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
the true value of your...
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work from home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
This is an ad for QuickFit. And even if you're not using your car at the moment, it's worth a listen. Because although QuickFit are still open for essential maintenance, there's plenty you can do yourself to make sure your car's ready when you need it. Keep an eye on tyre pressures, check fuel and fluid levels, and clear out some of those old cups. They're only going to sit there going mouldy. For more tips and information, visit quickfit.com. QuickFit, still there when you need them.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are mixed this morning as the U.S. hits a grim milestone in the coronavirus outbreak. U.S. deaths have now passed 100,000. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The United States has the unenviable distinction of the greatest number of deaths from the pandemic. And it all happened within the span of 4 months. Still, optimism for a vaccine is gathering steam, and the rise in U.S. infections continues to slow. Dr. Anthony Fauci says vaccine efforts could yield results before the end of the year. The latest count of daily cases rose 1.2%, below last week's average of 1.4%. The number of dead equal to 2 sold-out Yankee stadiums. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
John, thank you. Meantime, President Trump is escalating his fight with Twitter. He has taken exception to the company's new fact-checking feature and is poised to act as soon as today. Here with the very latest is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern.
President Trump is preparing an executive order that could bring lawsuits down on Twitter, Facebook, and other tech companies. A draft of the order obtained by Bloomberg shows it would have the government reduce liability protections the social networks currently have for third-party posts. Now, the order could allow users to sue Twitter, Facebook, and others for taking down posts if those posts meet certain criteria. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Anne Murray, thank you. Overseas, Chinese lawmakers have passed sweeping national security legislation targeting Hong Kong. The move risks fueling more demonstrations and stokes concern that essential freedoms will be curbed in the city.
And the move risks a strong response from the White House. That's after the administration said it can no longer certify the city's political autonomy from China. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
This could lead to sanctions on Chinese companies and officials, and China has threatened to retaliate. And for global markets, well, it could mark a return to the hysteria of the U.S.-China trade war. More importantly, this could alter Hong Kong's status and China's status on the world stage. There's a lot still unclear, though. What's actually in the Chinese national security law for Hong Kong? And does the U.S. aim at selective Chinese targets or make a more sweeping move like dropping Hong Kong's special status? In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. There's word that the Trump administration plans to cancel visas for thousands of Chinese graduate students. According to the New York Times, the White House wants to expel students tied to universities affiliated with the People's Liberation Army. Now let's get you up to date on how stocks are faring with S&P futures up 6 points, Dow futures up 154, NASDAQ futures down 18. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks. It's 5:33 on Wall Street. Let's bring Michael Barr back in for a check on what's going on around the world. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. Governor Andrew Cuomo was in Washington to visit with President Trump about infrastructure. The New York governor, during his daily coronavirus briefing in the nation's capital, says New York pays more to the government than any other state and should be helped to recover from the pandemic.
And they increased the money they were taking from the richer states. They took another $23 billion from California, another $14 billion from New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Illinois, Connecticut. The hypocrisy is so insulting.
Cuomo also says the virus came from Europe to the U.S. and not China. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says his state is now well past the peak of the coronavirus outbreak. Murphy says, though, there are still many people in hospitals being treated for COVID-19. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont spoke to Bloomberg Radio about his state preparing for reopening. Lamont says going into New York isn't necessary anymore, and Connecticut welcomes it.
One of the things we're finding now is people realize in this day and age you don't necessarily have to be in, say, New York City to work 5 days a week. Telecommuting is an option that's going to play a big part in Connecticut's future, I think, to our advantage. If you think the idea of social distancing and stay at home, this may be the beginning of something. Having a little backyard is sort of a plus. So I think we're finding our real estate phones are ringing off the hook right now as people adjust their lifestyle a little bit in the post-COVID world.
The Connecticut Department of Public Health says there were 34 new deaths Wednesday. Protests rocked Minneapolis for the second straight night after the death of a black man in police custody, including looting and fires. At least one person was killed in what police believe was a homicide. 4 Minneapolis officers were fired after video footage on Memorial Day showed one of them kneeling on George Floyd's neck until he became unresponsive. There have been growing calls for criminal charges against the white officer who knelt on Floyd's neck, including from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry.
Why is the man who killed George Floyd not in jail? If you had done it, or I had done it, we would be behind bars right now.
A suspect in 2 killings and kidnapping in Connecticut has been arrested. Authorities say after a 6-day manhunt, 23-year-old Peter Manfredonia was taken into custody last night in Hagerstown, Maryland. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. We're coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Well, Nathan, while the NHL announced its plan to return, and the NBA may do likewise soon, baseball may not happen in 2020 because both sides are dug in on how much the players should get paid in a shortened season without fans. The owners made a proposal with a sliding scale of pay reduction. Players like Washington's Max Scherzer have reacted by saying it's a proposal the union will never agree to. Well, NFL owners agree to a rule change, expected to vote on one today. When a team kicks off late in the game but needs possession, there'd be another option to the onside kick. One play, no time coming off the clock, from their own 25-yard line. If they gain 15 yards, they keep possession, get a first down. The feeling is rule changes have made recovering an onside kick too rare. The NBA being sued for $1.25 million for not paying rent to the NBA store on Fifth Avenue. The NBA says it shouldn't have to pay rent since the store has been closed. Basketball Hall of Fame postponed its induction ceremony scheduled for late August until the spring of 2021. This year's Hall of Fame class included Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and the late Kobe Bryant. Phil Mickelson enjoyed the match so much he wants to do it every year. Instead of Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, he says he and Tiger Woods can play golf with Steph Curry and Michael Jordan, or Bill Murray and Larry David. Brady posted 9 takeaways that he had. Among them, he shouldn't wear the same pants for golf that he wore to church. They split during the round. Also, Brady said he should stick to his day job. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Okay, John, thank you. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
New Jersey highway commissioners have voted to raise tolls as much as 36%. That to support a $24 billion capital program. The New Jersey Turnpike Authority long-term plan would pay for widening and other changes to the Garden State Parkway and the 117-mile New Jersey Turnpike. Long Island's become the latest region of New York to begin easing some restrictions put in place to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Construction, manufacturing, agriculture, and retail with curbside pickup are permitted in the first phase of reopening. The Stamford Board of Finance has cut the city and school budgets by a massive $32.2 million. The Advocate reports the budget now goes to the Board of Representatives. It could cut another $2.8 million to reach a total of $35 million in cuts needed to balance a budget that's been decimated by the economic fallout brought on by the coronavirus. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
Okay, Ed, thank you. It is 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio's on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on WHAS in Louisville. Papa John's is logging accelerated sales growth through the pandemic.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WIOD in Miami, I'm reporting Virgin Trains is proposing a major expansion of its commuter rail service in Miami-Dade County.
I'm Roger Hearing on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the new Test and Trace program the government's announced to help the country out of lockdown.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting COVID-19 is putting some automakers' electric car dreams on hold.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. It's 5:39 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online with the cover on President Trump's political gamble to reopen the economy. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, or watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. Coming up today, we get the latest reading on weekly jobless claims. Economists forecast a reading around 2.1 million. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
These are nightmarish numbers, and Bloomberg Economics says the pace of improvement has been stubbornly slow. Reopening the economy will probably help, but some sectors, some airlines and retailers, the bars and restaurants, are hanging on for dear life. Almost 40 million jobless claims have flooded state unemployment agencies since the pandemic erupted in March. Also on today's economic calendar, revised data on first quarter GDP and April durable goods orders, both forecast to be in the red. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. Ahead of all that economic data, futures, at least the ones less tech-focused, are in the green. S&P futures higher by 3 points. Dow futures up 128. NASDAQ futures lower by 21 points. 10-year Treasury yield 0.67%. And you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is your Bloomberg.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message, and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
There and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Report, coronavirus update. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi shares the grim news.
100,000 people dying from the coronavirus. 100,000 people in about 100 days.
Pelosi joined House Democrats in calling for President Trump to lead a nationwide coronavirus testing program. The White House has submitted to Congress a national coronavirus testing strategy with a goal to conduct 300,000 tests every day. Senate Democrat Dianne Feinstein cites experts who've been saying at least 800,000 tests must be conducted daily. Meanwhile, the House continues to urge the Senate to pass its latest coronavirus stimulus bill that includes more funding for testing. Lindy Kenyon, Washington.
Dr. Chris Murray, director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, says, quote, "We now have clear evidence that wearing masks works. It's probably a 50% protection against transmission," end quote. I'm John Trout.
It's a new disease making an unprecedented impact.
The job losses were widespread.
It is a stunningly historic moment. Your best strategy?
Is this a market that's accepted reality?
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by SEI. Challenges highlight one's character, partnership, and resilience. At SEI, they act as one community with their clients. Go to SEIC.com/banks. And stocks are climbing. U.S. stock index futures are mixed as investors weigh fresh fiscal stimulus for the European Union against increased friction between the U.S. and China. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 3 points. Dow futures up 150. NASDAQ futures down 23. The DAX in Germany is up about 0.5%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds. Yield 0.67%. Yield on the 2-year 0.17%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.7% or 54 cents at $32.28 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12.50 at $17.39.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1011 against the dollar. British pound 1.2260 and the yen 107.73. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the number of dead Americans from coronavirus has topped 100,000. More in this live report from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
Yeah, Michael, that is the highest death toll in the world from the pandemic. The milestone comes 126 days since the first case and 87 days since the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced the country's first fatality in late February in Washington state. Meantime, Anthony Fauci, the U.S. government's top infectious disease expert, said there's a good chance a vaccine may be deployable by November or December. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, John. President Trump is threatening social media companies with new regulations or even closure after Twitter added fact checks to 2 of his tweets. Connecticut State Police say a college student wanted for 2 murders has been captured in Maryland. Peter Manfredonia has been the subject of a 6-day search. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's 5:49 on Wall Street and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. This morning, tensions between the U.S. and China appear to be nearing a record low. This morning, Chinese lawmakers have approved sweeping national security legislation targeting Hong Kong. It's a move that risks a strong response from the White House. Let's get more now from Hong Kong. Bloomberg's Rishad Salamat joins us live. Good evening to you, Rish, in your part of the world. Tell us more about what we know about this legislation for Hong Kong.
Good morning, Nathan. And it wasn't a great surprise, this National People's Congress voting 278-1 with 6 abstentions on this sweeping new national security legislation, which is targeted at Hong Kong. Curiously yet unsurprisingly, they actually voted on a law that no one knows the details of, simply because it hasn't been written yet. China's officials could now take months to sort out the details of laws which ban subversion, secession, terrorism, and foreign interference before they're given to Hong Kong's administration to essentially carry out. All of this against this backdrop of threats by the White House to respond strongly to a measure that democracy advocates here say will simply curb essential freedoms in the city. And the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said shortly after the decision that the one country, two systems policy, which governs relations with the city, would actually remain in place. And that's just something that the White House simply isn't buying. The Trump administration on Wednesday did take this huge step of saying that it could no longer certify Hong Kong's status as autonomous from China, which was actually something promised before the British handed the city back in 1997. Now, this move has all sorts of ramifications. It could trigger a range of actions by the Trump administration, right from sanctions on Chinese officials to actually also going on and perhaps doubling down and revoking the city's special trading status that it has with the U.S., Nathan.
And even before we know the specific details about this legislation, Rish, we've already seen a pretty strong response on the streets of Hong Kong, particularly in the central part of the city. Is this resumption of protest mirroring the overall sentiment about how people in Hong Kong itself feel about this legislation?
There's a sense, Nathan, here of resignation in part. I mean, yesterday we saw certainly hundreds of demonstrators. We had about 300 arrests, but there was nothing like the turnout that we've had in the past. So is it protest fatigue? Is it a sense that the Chinese have enacted a fait accompli, as it were, and Hong Kong's most prominent pro-democracy advocates have called on Donald Trump to hit China hard, even to the point of revoking the city's special trading status. And of course, that's all down to this law. The pressure on the U.S. to act swiftly and forcefully against China over its actions here do, of course, follow on from Secretary of State Michael Pompeo's announcement late Wednesday that the U.S. believes Hong Kong is no longer sufficiently autonomous from the mainland, and that would be under American law. We have to look at the market reaction. It was anything but an ordinary afternoon for stocks here. Chinese lawmakers approving this plan here. The Hang Seng plunging at one stage about 2.2%, erased all of its losses, and then we saw this rally for Chinese companies, which spurred on speculation that we got mainland-based funds were actually behind the gains. Perhaps they were told to pile in there. In the end, though, the gauge was about the Hang Seng I'm talking about here, closing 0.7% lower. And Nathan, that's where we are. There's a sense of consternation. There's an uneasy peace on the streets of the city as I speak.
We got about a minute left here, Rish. I mean, given this legislation and long-term concerns over trade between the U.S. and China, and of course the dispute over the coronavirus outbreak, I mean, it almost feels as though U.S.-China relations couldn't get much lower.
Well, there's a certain ring of truth, isn't it, to what the foreign minister said over the weekend, the Chinese minister saying that the U.S. was driving relations between the two to a Cold War. The latest salvo seems to be, this is from the New York Times, that the administration is planning to cancel the visas of thousands of Chinese graduate students and researchers in the U.S. who have direct ties to universities which would be affiliated with the PLA. Just to wrap up here, now, according to John Pomfret, who's a historian on bilateral ties, every Chinese leader since Deng Xiaoping has sent at least one child to study in the United States. So it does seem that we are heading towards a nadir with regards to Sino-American relations. Back to you.
All right, Bloomberg's Rishad Salamat with us this morning from Hong Kong. Thank you for the update, Rish. Really appreciate it. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:54 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
A top federal trade commissioner says antitrust regulators may be more skeptical about attorneys who tried to win approval for merger deals during the pandemic by claiming one of the firms involved is failing. Democrats in the House say the Federal Trade Commission should look into TikTok to determine whether it is collecting children's information without permission from parents. Vince McMahon withdrew his bid to buy the assets of the bankrupt firm Alpha Entertainment, which owns the fledgling XFL Football League.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. The Supreme Court, for the second time, refusing to intervene in a case over prisoners in COVID-19. Justices left in place a judge's order that could require federal prison officials to move hundreds of inmates out of an Ohio facility where at least 9 people have died from coronavirus. For more on the move, June Grasso speaks to Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr.
Greg, the justices were divided about whether or not to intervene. Tell us about the order.
So the court, over 3 dissents, 3 conservative justices, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, the court said, we are not going to block this order, at least right now. There were actually 2 orders. There was the original April 22nd order, and then there was another one on May the 19th. And the court said this application from the federal government is only challenging the earlier order. We don't see a problem there. We're not going to block that. But we're leaving open the possibility that they can come back to us, depending on how the May 19th order is implemented, depending on what happens with that when it's on appeal.
So there was another case that we talked about involving a geriatric prison in Texas. The court there also refused to intervene.
Yes, and that was a case where it was the inmates that were asking the Supreme Court to intervene. 2 inmates said that a state prison, a Texas state prison, wasn't doing enough to protect them from infection. That was actually the very first time the court had been asked to intervene. And the Supreme Court, again, said we're not going to get involved. They left intact a lower court ruling that had blocked a trial judge's order. So for the time being, the pattern seems to be that the Supreme Court largely wants to stay out of these matters if it can.
The ACLU in the first case said that the courts have been slow to step in here. Is it that the courts have been slow to step in, or the Supreme Court has been slow to step in?
Well, the Supreme Court's pattern is not to step in. In terms of the lower courts, it just kind of depends on who the judge is. In both these cases that we were talking about, the trial court actually, the initial judge actually did put in place an order that favored the prisoners and required the prisoners to take additional steps to protect them. We will no doubt see many more of these as we go along. There may well be a more clear pattern.
And that's Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr speaking with June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures have turned lower, down about 3 points now. Dow futures up 70, NASDAQ futures down 48. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, May 28th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
The U.S. hits a grim milestone as coronavirus deaths pass 100,000.
President Trump escalates his fight with Twitter, aiming an executive order at social media companies.
And U.S. tensions with China reach a fever pitch as Beijing approves sweeping national security laws targeting Hong Kong.
New York Governor Cuomo tells Washington to stop abusing New York. Plus, New Jersey says it's well past the peak of the virus outbreak. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The NBA weighing different playoff formats in a return, while baseball players have reacted negatively to the proposal made by owners for a pay reduction for the shortened season.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are mixed after the S&P 500 hit an 11-week high. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 3 points. Dow futures up 74. NASDAQ futures down 48. The DAX in Germany's up 0.2%. CAC in Paris up 0.5%. FTSE 100 up 0.4%. Nikkei 225 in Japan jumped 2.3%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong fell 0.7%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 0.67%, yield on the 2-year 0.17%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.9% or 62 cents at $32.18 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12.80 at $17.3960 an ounce. The euro 1.1011 against the dollar. The yen 107.72. Nathan.
And Karen, we begin with a grim milestone in the coronavirus outbreak. U.S. deaths are now past 100,000. For more, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yet, Nathan, that 100,000 mark is the highest in the world. Infections in the U.S. are more than 4 times higher than any other country, coming in at 1.6 million. Still, optimism for a vaccine is gathering steam. Dr. Anthony Fauci says efforts could yield results before the end of the year.
I still think we have a good chance, if all the things fall in the right place, that we might have a vaccine that would be deployable by the end of the year.
Still, the rise in U.S. infections continues to slow. The latest count of daily cases rose 1.2%, below last week's average of 1.4%. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. NASDAQ futures are in the red this morning after word that President Trump plans to escalate his fight with Twitter. He's taken exception to the company's new fact-checking feature and is poised to act as soon as today. For the very latest, we bring in Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. Good morning, Anne-Marie.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. President Trump is preparing an executive order that could bring lawsuits down on Twitter, Facebook, and other tech companies. A draft of the order obtained by Bloomberg shows it would have the government reduce liability protections the social networks currently have for third-party posts. Now, the order could allow users to sue Twitter, Facebook, and others for taking down posts if those posts meet certain criteria. The move comes after Twitter fact-checked an unsubstantiated claim by the president on mail-in voting. So far, the White House is declining to comment. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you. Meantime, tensions between the U.S. and China are near a fever pitch. This morning, Chinese lawmakers approved sweeping national security legislation targeting Hong Kong. Democracy advocates say it will curb essential freedoms in the city. The move also risks a strong response from the White House. Bloomberg's Selena Wang joins us from Beijing with the latest on the significance of this vote.
That's right. China has approved this proposal for the new national security law, which of course comes as no surprise. This resolution will then be forwarded to the National People's Congress Standing Committee, which will actually draft the details. So it could still be another few months from now when we finally get the details of what these laws are going to look like that are going to ban subversion, secession, terrorism, and foreign interference. But likely this law could be passed by June or August.
And Selena, this move from China risks a variety of responses from the Trump administration. Tell us the range of outcomes that we could see on that front.
They could include financial sanctions, visa restrictions, export controls, and possibly even revoking Hong Kong's special trading status with the U.S. So the U.S. has a really delicate line to walk here about sending a strong message to Beijing while also not hurting Hong Kong people, businesses, and U.S. businesses operating in Hong Kong. Now, when it comes to China's response, they've reiterated that they could take countermeasures, that this is foreign meddling in an internal affair, and they've also tried to allay fears that this national security law would fundamentally change the freedoms and judicial independence of Hong Kong. But that really hasn't allayed the concerns of the business community in Hong Kong, which have issued quite strong statements saying that this is fundamentally the end of the one country, two systems rule.
All right, Bloomberg's Selena Wang reporting for us from Beijing. Thank you, Selena. This move from China also comes on the heels of the U.S. House passing a bill allowing sanctions on Chinese officials for human rights abuses against Muslims. Add that to the Hong Kong legislation, disputes over the coronavirus outbreak, and long-term concerns over trade, and tensions between the U.S. and China appear to be reaching record levels.
And there's also the issue of Huawei. The company's chief financial officer failed to block her extradition to the U.S. after a Canadian judge ruled the proceedings will continue. Bloomberg's Natalie Obiko-Pearson has more from Vancouver.
This was really a key test, an early chance for Meng Wanzhou to have this case thrown out. Essentially, what was at the crux of the matter was a principle called double criminality that has to be met in order for Canada to consider extradition. Meng had tried to have it thrown out, arguing that this didn't meet that requirement. The judge disagreed with her, and so that means she remains under house arrest and that the proceedings will continue.
Meng Wanzhou has emerged as a high-profile target in the U.S. effort to contain China and Huawei, which Washington sees as a national security threat. She's been charged with conspiring to defraud banks by conducting transactions that violated U.S. sanctions on Iran.
And there's also word the Trump administration plans to cancel visas for thousands of Chinese graduate students. According to the New York Times, the White House wants to expel students tied to colleges affiliated with the People's Liberation Army. The plan would be the first to target a specific category of Chinese students, which form the largest foreign university population in the United States.
S&P futures are lower, down 3 points. Dow futures are higher, up 70, and NASDAQ futures are down 51. The 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 0.67%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.17%. And NYMEX crude oil down 1.9%. It's at $32.19 a barrel. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
Okay, thanks, Karen. It's 6:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr now for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says Washington needs to stop abusing states hit hardest by the coronavirus. The governor says New York pays more to the federal government than any other state, and there are many states that take more money from the government than it contributes.
The conservatives want to argue against redistribution of wealth. Why should you take money from the rich and give it to the poor? That's exactly what you are doing. That is exactly what you have done every year.
Cuomo met with President Trump in Washington to lobby for federal funding for infrastructure. Governor Phil Murphy says New Jersey is now well past the peak of the outbreak and will continue the reopening process in the state.
The reason we've been able to get to this point is because we have made building out our testing capacity a key priority. As of today, there are now 164 sites, both publicly and privately operated, up and running across the state.
Murphy says, though, there are still many people in hospitals being treated for COVID-19. There were another 148 new virus-related deaths in the state. In Connecticut, the total number of COVID-19 cases declined on Wednesday. The State Department of Public Health says there were 34 new deaths. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont, speaking to Bloomberg Radio, talked about his priority when businesses want to reopen in his state.
Public health. That's number 1, 2, and 3 for me in priorities. You're right. They're taking a hit. The state takes a small hit, but that's secondary to doing everything we can from a public health point of view to slow things down just a little bit longer. We found out that 2 weeks is an eternity in COVID years, right? It really can make a difference. So give us another 2 or 3 weeks.
Protests over the death of a black man in police custody broke out in Minneapolis for a second straight night, with demonstrators in a standoff with officers outside a police precinct and looting of nearby stores. One person was killed Wednesday in what police are calling a homicide. Meanwhile, Mayor Jacob Fry is calling for criminal charges against a white officer who pinned George Floyd to the ground with his knee. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. At 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashauer.
Well, Nathan, as of now, baseball in 2020 is in serious danger of not happening. Reaction to the proposal made by MLB owners to players, not good. Max Scherzer, the Washington Ace, who's on the union's executive committee, tweeted last night, the players are simply not going to accept a deal where their pay is reduced more than what had already been agreed to. Scherzer, as a high-paid guy, would see his pay come way down. The NBA and NHL are in a better position because their players have already gotten paid for the bulk of the regular season. So they're moving on. We heard about the NHL's plan for a 2014 playoff. The NBA said to be weighing several playoff scenarios, including a World Cup soccer-like plan where there would be 5 or 6 groups of 4 teams. They would do round-robin games, and 2 would advance from each group to a more typical playoff bracket. The Nets, Spencer Dinwiddie, was on ESPN.
Too much more than the general public right now. Adam Silver is, doing his thing as commissioner and relaying the messages, and Michelle Roberts, as our union president, is doing her thing as well. So we're just kind of playing it by ear. We did open up the practice facility, but it's not mandatory that we go back to New York as of this moment right now. And so we're just continuing our training and trying to stay as ready as possible.
Of course, the Nets eyeing next season when Kevin Durant returns from his leg injury to join Kyrie Irving. There have been rumors Brooklyn's going to try and acquire Bradley Beal from Washington. Beal averaged 30 points a game before the shutdown. New Knicks president Leon Rose just made 3 hires to his front office. Tom Thibodeau, the former Chicago and Minnesota coach, has emerged as the clear favorite to become the Knicks' next coach. John Stanshauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, another sports resuming, mixed martial arts and boxing. They're back in business in Nevada. The state's athletic commission has unanimously agreed to allow 2 UFC events and 2 top-ranked boxing shows in Las Vegas over the next 2 weeks. This ends a moratorium on combat sports in Nevada. It's lasted 2.5 months during the coronavirus pandemic. Futures are mixed at the moment. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
Imagine.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime Podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
From Bloomberg Television, here's Tom McKenzie.
Let's discuss how the souring relationship is affecting corporate deals between the US and China with Richard Gu, partner at Linklaters Jiaosheng. How is the pandemic impact, and how are these relationships between Beijing and Washington? How is that affecting deal activities you see it now?
We see a little impact on the existing deals in the pipeline, and we actually got quite a few inbound deals, including deals from U.S. investors into China, which will be signed or closed very soon. And those deals are investments into sectors in China, including consumers, auto, and the logistics. And I think the investment rationale is driven by the proximity to the Chinese market, because all of the investments they will produce products targeting the Chinese market. But for outbound M&A activities from China, it's some deals are put on hold due to COVID-19 because of the travel restrictions, and also because of the various restrictions imposed by the U.S. government targeting Chinese investments in the U.S. And looking forward, there are less deals in the pipeline on the market than ideal.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are climbing while U.S. stock index futures are mixed this morning as investors weigh fresh fiscal stimulus for the European Union against increased friction between the U.S. and China. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are little change. Dow futures up 87. NASDAQ futures down 50. The DAX in Germany's up 0.3%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 0.67%. Yield on the 2-year 0.17%. NYMEX crude oil down 1.9% or 62 cents at $32.19 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $10.50 at $17.3720 an ounce. The euro 1.0998 against the dollar. The yen 107.75. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the number of dead Americans from coronavirus has topped 100,000. More in this live report from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
Michael, that is the highest death toll in the world from the pandemic. The milestone comes 126 days since the first case and 87 days since the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced the country's first fatality in late February in Washington state. Meantime, Anthony Fauci, the U.S. government's top infectious disease expert, said there's a good chance a vaccine may be deployable by November or December. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, John. A suspect in 2 killings and a kidnapping in Connecticut has been arrested. Authorities say after a 6-day manhunt, 23-year-old Peter Manfredonia was taken into custody last night in Hagerstown, Maryland. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak on a morning when tensions between the U.S. and China appear to be reaching a new low. Chinese lawmakers have approved sweeping national security legislation targeting Hong Kong, a move that risks a strong White House response. For more on the implications, let's hear from a former governor of Hong Kong, Christopher Patton. He spoke with Bloomberg's Tom Keene moments ago on Bloomberg Television.
Lord Patton, who do you blame for this moment? It was to wait at least 50 years. We didn't get there. Who do you blame?
Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is a new sort of Chinese dictator. Well, when I say new, different from his immediate predecessors. Certainly in the 1990s and since 1997, while have been far from open in Hong Kong or in China, on the whole, Chinese leaders kept to their agreement on one country, two systems, that Hong Kong could continue with a high degree of autonomy with its own freedoms. What we've seen with Xi Jinping is a determination to strengthen the party's hold over everything. He's been throwing China's weight around in a way which is a danger to all democracies around the world, and I think he needs to be called out. And he's taken advantage of this coronavirus, which of course has been more difficult to deal with the way it was covered up initially by secretive communist officials. He's tried to take advantage of that, not only in Hong Kong, but there are incursions by Chinese troops into India. They've been throwing their weight around around Taiwan. They've been throwing their weight around in the South China Sea, despite the promises they made to President Obama. So this is down to Xi Jinping, who is terrified of having to deliver in Hong Kong the promises that people were made.
We see this, Lord Patton, on a week where Stanley Ho dies. There are the merchants of Hong Kong going back centuries. How would you suggest the business leaders of Hong Kong will react to this? What would be the best Patton path?
Well, I want to say this very clearly. When I was governor of Hong Kong, there was great support from the American Chamber of Commerce, from the United States in general, for what we were trying to secure in Hong Kong. And even though I had worries about China, as we all did, worries about a communist system, not about Chinese people, but about communism, I used to lobby every year Congress to give China most favored nation status, relatively open trade, although then outside the WTO rules. I think that what should happen, I hope, following the Secretary of State's Pompeo's understandable reaction, is that we should form together countries which will make China pay for what it's doing. I hope that we will stand up for Hong Kong, as over 500 political leaders and church leaders and others around the world have already done. And I hope that business will welcome that, because there's no question at all that if you undermine the rule of law in Hong Kong, then you start to make Hong Kong a less important financial hub in Asia.
Lord Patton, your comment from 23 years ago, your historic single sentence, I have relinquished the administration of this government. God save the Queen, Patton. What is your advice this morning to the Secretary of State of the United States as you call for an allied response, a developed economy response? What would be your counsel to Mr. Pompeo?
My counsel to Mr. Pompeo would be, first of all, to thank him for the interest he's taken in Hong Kong, which I think is widely and enthusiastically accepted in Hong Kong. He's not interfering in Hong Kong. He's expressing the sentiments of a democratic politician about the possible fate of what was a community under the rule of law. So I'd thank him for that. The Chinese don't understand that the problems in Hong Kong are because of them, not because from people from outside. But I would also ask him to remember that liberal democracies around the world, and I mean the word liberal not in a particularly American sense, but in the classical sense, open societies around the world are always strongest when they work together. The world did so well for 50 or 60 years because under American leadership, Europe, Japan, Canada, Australia, United States, all of us work together under American leadership. And I hope that that's what this administration or a future administration will do, because China is an enemy to us now. I'm sorry to say that, but that's how it behaves. Not Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party.
And that was Christopher Patton, the former governor of Hong Kong, speaking earlier this morning with Bloomberg's Tom Keene. And on this morning of rising tensions between the U.S. and China, we are seeing mixed action on the futures markets. S&P futures are lower now by 1.5. Dow futures are higher by 77 points. NASDAQ futures down 48. 10 years up 230 seconds, yield 0.67%. 2-year Treasury yield 0.17%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The latest look at jobs lost comes out this morning, and we may see some new categories as state and local governments cut back on staffing. That's expected to keep the total number of first-time new unemployment claims last week above the 2 million mark for the 10th week in a row. More could come, too. Boeing is planning to cut more than 12,000 jobs, with even more job cuts planned in the months ahead. American Airlines says it'll cut management and support staff by a third. The personnel will all stay on the payroll, though, until after federal support that bans layoffs runs out at the end of September. And after the collapse in oil prices, Chevron says it's planning a 10 to 15% reduction in its global workforce this year. That could come to about 6,000 of Chevron's non-gas station employees. Crude futures this morning are falling about 60 cents to about $32.20 a barrel. Stock futures have lost some steam, too. S&P futures down 2, NASDAQ futures 57, Dow futures are up 75 points. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted... Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
Get your cook on with Asda, with rollbacks on our 227-gram Butcher's Selection sirloin steak, was £3.55, now only £2.85. And our 255-gram Butcher's Selection rump steak, was £3.55, now just £2.75. Have a sizzling steak night. Thousands more rollbacks across the store. Asda. Selected stores subject to availability.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events. He does! Fabry wins it! To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are mixed this morning as the U.S. hits a grim milestone in the coronavirus outbreak. U.S. deaths have now passed 100,000. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The United States has the unenviable distinction of the greatest number of deaths from this pandemic. It all happened within the span of 4 months. Still, optimism for a vaccine is gathering steam, and the rise in U.S. infections continues to slow. Dr. Anthony Fauci says vaccine efforts could yield results before the end of the year. The latest count of daily cases rose 1.2%. That's below last week's average of 1.4%. The number of dead is equal to 2 sold-out Yankee stadiums. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Meantime, President Trump is escalating his fight with Twitter. He has taken exception to the company's new fact-checking feature and is poised to act as soon as today. Here with the very latest is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern.
President Trump is preparing an executive order that could bring lawsuits down on Twitter, Facebook, and other tech companies. A draft of the order obtained by Bloomberg shows it would have the government reduce liability protections the social networks currently have for third-party posts. Now, the order could allow users to sue Twitter, Facebook, and others for taking down posts if those posts meet certain criteria. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you. Overseas, Chinese lawmakers have passed sweeping national security legislation targeting Hong Kong. The move risks fueling more demonstrations and stokes concern that essential freedoms will be curbed in the city.
The move also risks a strong response from the White House. That's after the administration said it could no longer certify the city's political autonomy from China. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
This could lead to sanctions on Chinese companies and officials, and China has threatened to retaliate. And for global markets, well, it could mark a return to the hysteria of the U.S.-China trade war. More importantly, this could alter Hong Kong's status and China's status on the world stage. There's a lot still unclear, though. What's actually in the Chinese national security law for Hong Kong? And does the U.S. aim at selective Chinese targets or make a more sweeping move like dropping Hong Kong's special status? In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. And there's word that the Trump administration plans to cancel visas for thousands of Chinese graduate students. According to the New York Times, the White House wants to expel students tied to universities affiliated with the People's Liberation Army. S&P futures are now up 1 point. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 6:33 on Wall Street. Now let's get more on what's going on around the world from Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was in Washington. The governor met with President Trump about infrastructure projects important to New York, like improving Penn Station.
How do we take some of these big infrastructure projects that have been sitting around for a long time, which if we were all smarter and better, we would have done 30 years ago, and actually get them up and running, because we have to do this work anyway, and because we need the jobs now more than ever.
Cuomo also says New York pays more to the government than any other state and should be helped to recover from the pandemic. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says his state is now well past the peak of the coronavirus outbreak. Murphy says, though, there are still many hospitalizations. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont spoke to Bloomberg Radio about his state preparing for reopening. Lamont says going into New York isn't necessary anymore, and Connecticut welcomes it.
One of the things we're finding now is people realize in this day and age you don't necessarily have to be in, say, New York City to work 5 days a week. Telecommuting is an option that's going to play a big part in Connecticut's future, I think, to our advantage. If you think the idea of social distancing and stay at home, this may be the beginning of something. Having a little backyard is sort of a plus. So I think we're finding our real estate phones are ringing off the hook right now as people adjust their lifestyle a little bit in the post-COVID world.
Connecticut reported 34 new deaths Wednesday. Protests rocked Minneapolis for the second straight night after the death of a black man in police custody, including looting and fires. At least one person was killed. 4 Minneapolis officers were fired after video footage on Memorial Day showed one of them kneeling on George Floyd's neck until he became unresponsive. There have been growing calls for criminal charges against the white officer who knelt on Floyd's neck, including for Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry.
Why is the man who killed George Floyd not in jail? If you had done it, or I had done it, we would be behind bars right now.
New Jersey highway commissioners voted to raise tolls as much as 36% to support a $24 billion capital program. For example, starting in September, maximum passenger vehicle tolls on the New Jersey Turnpike, a key to northeastern U.S. travel and commerce, would rise $5 to $18.85. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's coming up to 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower.
All right, Nathan, while the NHL announced its plan to return, and the NBA may do likewise soon, baseball may not happen in 2020 because both sides are dug in on how much the players should get paid in a shortened season without fans. The owners made a proposal with a sliding scale of pay reduction. Players like Washington's Max Scherzer have reacted by saying it's a proposal the union will never agree to. Well, NFL owners agreed on a rule change, expected to vote on one today. When a team kicks off late in the game but needs possession, there'd be another option to the onside kick. One play, no time coming off the clock from the 25-yard line. If they gain 15 yards, they keep possession, get a first down. The feeling is rule changes have made recovering onside kick too rare. Jets wideout Quincy Enunwa insists his career is not over, despite a neck injury that will prevent him from playing in 2020. The NBA being sued for not paying rent for the NBA store on Fifth Avenue. The league says it shouldn't have to pay rent since the store's been closed. The Basketball Hall of Fame postponed its induction ceremony scheduled for late August until the spring of 2021. This year's Hall of Fame class included Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and the late Kobe Bryant. Phil Mickelson enjoyed the match so much he wants to do it every year instead of Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Phil says he and Tiger Woods could play golf with Steph Curry and Michael Jordan, or Bill Murray and Larry David. Brady posted 9 takeaways he had from last Sunday. Among them, he shouldn't wear the same pants for golf that he wore to church. They split during the round. Also, Brady said he should stick to his day job. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. To 6:37 on Wall Street. Let's get more now on the potential impact of rising tensions with China on the economic recovery. Tom Porcelli is with us now, chief U.S. economist at RBC Capital Markets. Good morning, Tom. I wonder what impact you potentially see on the green shoots that we've started to see in the economy as businesses resume. Could rising Chinese tensions quash those?
I think that the real risk, I think, there is from a market perspective. I mean, I think we all recall just how the market dealt with those trade tensions over the course of the last year or two. So I think, it seemingly people in the market are relentlessly looking for something negative to latch onto. To us, this is a reasonable negative to latch onto, much more reasonable than some of the other conversation about whether things are improving here in the United States, because they are improving in the United States. I mean, I think your word green shoots, your phrase green shoots, is probably right. But I think that, if you want something negative to latch onto, I think that these tensions would fit the bill.
So where do you see the potential for the green shoots sprouting? I mean, is there a likelihood that we have a sustained recovery based on what we've seen so far with the way the reopening has gone?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems that we continue to move in the right direction. And look, we've said many times now, you're not really supposed to be looking at sort of the standard economic data. Standard economic data, the unemployment rate, ISM, and these other metrics, they're going to be late to the party. I mean, I don't think they're going to basically let you know early how things are evolving. I think you need to look at some other data. And so, with jobless claims today, it's probably worth just mentioning a couple of them that relate specifically to the labor backdrop, you could do things like look at Google Trends. There's search functions that you can plug in that will let you know that are actually give you a really good sense for how the labor backdrop is evolving, and we see continued improvement from a claims perspective. You could look at things like withheld income taxes. There's some pretty great data out there from one company in particular that helps manage small business payrolls. You continue to see improvement there. So I don't think there's any question that it's happening. I think the speed with which it will continue to happen, to me, is really where the debate is supposed to sit. And there, I think that's an outstanding question, obviously. One of the things that we have been pounding the table on is that, if you look at some of the polling data, some of the weekly polling data, it's quite clear that people want to engage. They want to get back to some semblance of normal. But I think that that's the push part of it. The pull part of it is, but they're really scared. They're scared of this virus. 50% of people think that they could die if they catch this. So, I think that's going to be the challenge for the reopening.
All right. Thanks, as always, Tom. Good speaking with you this morning. Tom Porcelli is Chief U.S. Economist at RBC Capital Markets. Futures mixed as we await the latest weekly jobless claims data. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, coronavirus update. Nearly 900 Americans have been killed every day by COVID-19 since early February.
A grim milestone in the coronavirus pandemic reported. U.S. deaths now topping 100,000, according to Johns Hopkins University. The pandemic also continuing to take a toll on businesses and workers. Aerospace giant Boeing laying off more than 6,700 employees Wednesday. Marriott International citing fallout from the pandemic as it warns of a significant number of layoffs later this year. Other businesses banding together to raise awareness. Lights going dark briefly in Times Square to symbolize what organizers say is the effect of insurers denying businesses coverage for coronavirus-related losses. I'm Reed Binion.
South Korea has reported its biggest jump in coronavirus cases in more than 50 days. Health officials say the resurgence is getting harder to track. I'm John Trout.
It's a new disease making an unprecedented impact.
The job losses were widespread.
It is a stunningly historic moment.
Your best strategy?
Is this a market that's accepted reality?
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. S&P futures are gaining this morning up 4 points. Dow futures up 123, while NASDAQ futures are lower, down 29. The DAX in Germany's up 0.5%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.17%. NYMEX crude oil's down 1.1% or 38 cents at $32.44 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.7% or $12.60 at $17.39.40 an ounce. The euro 1.1004 against the dollar, and the yen 107.76. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Trump is threatening social media companies with the new regulations or even closure after Twitter added fact checks to 2 of his tweets. Trump on Twitter says tech giants silence conservative voices. Connecticut State Police say a college student wanted for 2 murders has been captured in Maryland. Peter Manfredonia has been the subject of a 6-day search. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. We're at 6:48 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories from the nation's capital include the House passing a sanctions bill against China over its treatment of Uyghur Muslims, lawmakers delaying a vote on renewing provisions of the FISA law after President Trump threatened a veto, and just breaking from the Washington Post, sources telling them the White House has decided not to release updated economic projections this summer, breaking precedent due to uncertainty surrounding the coronavirus. Also making news, of course, China's national security law against Hong Kong. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter. That has been the story, Kate, that has been getting the market's attention this morning. How much attention does it have from President Trump? What are some of the options he could take here?
Well, I think what we have here is a situation where, the president's going to have to decide whether he wants to take, a gentler touch or a harsher touch in this situation. And, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's comments kind of put that into stark relief. Sort of the most extreme step that the president could take would be to revoke Hong Kong's special trading status. It's unclear that the White House seems to want to be kind of floating that idea out there as a possibility, but hasn't quite indicated that they're going to go that far. They've also talked about additional sanctions, which would be a less extreme approach. And so I think the question now is where on that spectrum Trump comes down.
Well, clearly, if the U.S. were to revoke Hong Kong's special status, that would have stark implications for an already fraught trade relationship with China.
Absolutely. And not to use too extreme of a metaphor, but I think when it comes to the U.S.-China relationship, that's clearly, at this stage, at least very much kind of considered the nuclear option, the most extreme option that Trump could take or would likely take. And I think that it just really comes down to a question of, how much the president is, you know, saber rattling and posturing here, and how much he really does want to potentially, you know, go that next step when it comes to, you know, creating an adverse relationship with Beijing. I think that, you know, he's trying to, my sense is that maybe he's trying to thread this needle a little bit by, you know, trying to use a big stick to kind of show, at least domestically, to his supporters and to his base that he's taking a hard line with China, while not necessarily having to follow through with the types of policies that would really poison the relationship and probably take the possibility of some kind of progress on trade firmly off the table.
Well, speaking of saber rattling, we've certainly seen a lot of that this week on Twitter, the president's favorite social medium, and threatening to crack down on social media itself. Tell us more about this executive order that the president could sign today.
Well, it sounds like the president is really, you know, the whole idea of Trump tweeting about shutting down social media is something that he has done repeatedly in the past. It sounds like now what he's doing, particularly in light of the fact check labels that Twitter has decided to slap onto some of his tweets this week. It sounds like he's taking that a step further by, you know, really looking at this executive order that would limit the liability protections that Twitter, Facebook, and other social media companies now enjoy when it comes to third-party posts. And so that would actually potentially subject those companies to bigger lawsuits if they do take action against certain, you know, posts that are, or certain information that's posted there. And so I think that, you know, is something that it sounds like, given how quickly the executive order was you know, drawn up, it's something that potentially the White House has kind of kept in the wings, you know, as kind of a warning for Twitter not to take any further steps against the president's Twitter feed.
Well, there's a real question, though, isn't there, about how much authority the president has to crack down on social media companies, just because they're private companies, for one thing, and First Amendment implications as well.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, there's obviously First Amendment implications of this, which is, you know, interesting because, you know, there's, it's, you know, Trump himself that's saying his free speech in this case is limited. That's is being limited by Twitter. That's one of the claims that he's making against Twitter. So obviously there are, you know, First Amendment implications. There are implications about, you know, what kind of authority the government should have over these type of companies. And in some ways, this is all kind of, I won't say uncharted territory, but new territory, because it's a new type of technology, a new type of media company. And so I think a lot of, you know, while there is, you know, some precedent and case law in this area, it's still kind of being developed. And so, you know, where and how the government can regulate social media is a question that was really put into the, you know, Washington conversation after the 2016 election, when there was a lot of attention drawn to misinformation on social media and how that could be used strategically by political candidates and political parties to influence elections. And I think that, you know, the U.S. government is still in, you know, a bit of a, not just the White House and the Trump administration, but Congress is still in a bit of a gray area about how to respond to that.
A lot of tension points this morning. Thank you, as always, for the update. That's Bloomberg U.S. Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter. You can read more about these stories on Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg Terminal. And a reminder, you can follow all the latest on Bloomberg Radio in Washington at Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 6:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report, brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology and the NJ Scholar Corps program, incentivizing residents who attend college out of state to come home and finish their degree in New Jersey. Learn more at njit.edu/NJ. Come home. Now here's Bob Moon.
Karen, Nathan, good day to you. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Yesterday is now the day after tomorrow at Cape Canaveral in Florida. Saturday afternoon is when SpaceX crews are set to try again to launch their privately made rocket ship with 2 NASA astronauts. The history-making flight to the International Space Station was called off with less than 17 minutes to go in the countdown because of thunderclouds and the risk of lightning.
Against SpaceX, unfortunately, we are not going to launch today.
President Trump and Vice President Pence tweeted that they both plan to return to Florida for the next try. The U.S. plans to join an international organization that will advise companies and governments on the responsible development of artificial intelligence. The U.S. thus becomes the last of the group of 7 countries to sign on. The group is called the Global Partnership on AI. It's tasked with studying and providing recommendations to encourage the creation of AI technologies that respect privacy and civil liberties. And that's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. Nathan, Karen.
All right,
thanks.
Bob Moon, thank you. Sorry, Nathan, it is 6:55 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report with John Tucker. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The American Camp Association estimates there are 14,000 camps in the U.S. Most of them are small businesses like Apple Farm Arts and Music Center in Elmer, New Jersey. For this nonprofit, the pandemic means no summer camp for kids. Executive Director Corey Solomon is with us now. Corey, this is heartbreaking.
It sadly doesn't seem like a reality that is safe. And ultimately, as a summer camp director, we always start with trying to make sure our kids and the families that they're safe. And we don't have enough information. Even with the guidelines that have been rolled out, the CDC and the American Camping Association has put out a lot of information. But with so many unknowns about this virus still and how it affects children and what's going to happen with this a second wave and, you know, living in an intimate environment like a residential camp where we have 350 people sleeping and eating and, you know, playing together, it's not a reality that I think will happen. So sadly, we are planning to cancel the summer, which would be the first summer we don't have camp in 60 years.
In terms of the money that you got, the reservations, how does that work?
That's the part of this that makes it financially so difficult because most of our families register for camp at the end of the summer for the following summer, and then they pay quarterly payments leading up to that. So we've already collected, you know, several hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition. What we're trying to do now is figure out the best options to make sure that we do right by our families because those relationships ultimately are the most important, but also make sure that we can make it through to next summer still. So we're providing families with the option to roll over their camp tuition to next summer, which would be the most helpful financially for us outside of donating the money, which is, of course, ultimately the best choice for the organization. But, of course, you know, not all families are in a position to be able to do that. And then the third option would be that they do get a refund.
And I'm sure issuing refunds, that would put your camp in a precarious financial situation. It's tough. Corey Solomon, Executive Director of Apple Farm Arts and Music Center in Elmer, New Jersey. Best of luck. Thanks for being with us. We're going to continue to look at small businesses impacted by the global pandemic every day at this time, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Small Business Report. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. Bloomberg surveillance straight ahead, but Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversation.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Thanks to National Lottery players, the Emerald Centre are now providing emergency food supplies and support for people in Bedfordshire like Alan. Thank you. And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. You know, Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. You know, I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. You know, Mike just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
It's hard enough to forecast where the economy is going to be going over the next several months or quarters. Forecasting what potential output will be in the next several years is even harder.
The behavior of the U.S. stock market is very unusual. Every other financial market essentially is pricing in something closer to a euro.
Economic forecasts are hazardous at best. They're even more so now.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance with equity futures all over the place this Thursday. We're live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Farrow together with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg. Tom, so much has happened in the last 24 hours between the United States and China, but not much has changed. And I think that's critical. We are still waiting for the White House's response and what they do next.
No, it's absolutely going to be the White House's response. Maybe we'll hear from Secretary Pompeo. Of course, we had the New York Times article, John, in the last 90 minutes, I'm guessing maybe 2 hours, about Chinese students in America. But I agree with you. It's incredibly fluid. John, we spoke with Lord Patton about an hour ago, and he was deeply emotional about this moment.
Well, I imagine he is, Tom. He was the last governor of Hong Kong before it was handed over in 97. And I'm just trying to understand from his perspective what he thinks foreign governments should do at this point, Tom. We'll be talking about the special trading status over the next few hours. I just wonder whether it makes a difference if the United States rescinds that.
You absolutely nailed that, John. Lord Patton, late in the interview, went right to that point, and he said, ad-libbing, he said that very clearly that the Trump administration can't do this alone. There has to be a developed economy and developed politics response, again, to 2047 being slammed forward to where we are now.
Lisa, of course, we've got to do more than one thing at once. We've got to look at the tension between China, Hong Kong and the United States and then get into the data. 90 minutes away, jobless claims. It's Thursday morning, which means we've got to look at some ugly jobs data.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been noting is that the pessimism that we're seeing in the economic data contrasts completely with the optimism that we're seeing in markets. More than 40 million jobs are expected to have been lost in the past 2.5 months. That comes up at 8:30 a.m., as you said, which is one of the main things that I'm watching today. That is the U.S. initial jobless claims. And then at 11 a.m., I'm interested to see the EIA crude oil inventory report, especially as early data shows an actual build in stockpiles going against what we had seen previously. And then today we have speeches from New York Fed's Williams as well as Philadelphia Fed's Patrick Harker. And yesterday you were speaking, John, with the Fed's Williams, who talked about yield curve control, how he was willing to look at it. I'm looking for a better sense of how far the Fed is willing to go in backstopping asset prices as we face a couple of rocky months ahead.
Yeah, Lisa, I think Tom knew what was coming, so Tom took the day off. Tom, have you missed the interview? The likes of Williams are now seriously looking at sitting on a price on the Treasury curve and going forward with yield curve control. They're thinking about it. I don't think they're there yet, might not be ready for the June meeting, but that's the direction of travel. Listening to him, listening to Clarida.
Well, there's no question about it. I mean, I guess I have to explain why I was off. I mean, it was therapy, folks. I was after 7,000 Dow points, John Farrow. You know, I missed the March bottom. John, to be honest, I think I missed the June bottom as well. I had, it was like the only time the doctor could see me.
Must have hurt, Tom. It must have hurt. Tom, it's great to have you back. We look forward to having you with us through the next several hours. Let's start the program this morning, shall we? We can do that with Evan Brown of UBS Asset Management. Evan, fantastic to catch up with you, sir. Let's just start with a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds at the moment. It is clear that the relationship between China and the United States is breaking down again. What is less clear is why this market is not picking up on it outside of the Hang Seng, outside of the Chinese currency. What's your read on things right now, Evan?
Yeah, I think the market is taking a lot of these broader issues on Hong Kong, on technology, on capital flows, and separating them from trade. They see the Hong Kong issues as more regional and drawn out, and the view from rightly or wrongly, the view from the overall market is that as long as this phase one trade deal stays in place, then it's not so much a global market issue. And I think it was actually on that point very interesting that on Friday the U.S. Trade Representative and U.S. Department of Agriculture coming out with a joint statement and saying that the trade agreement is still going well, and this even in the context of obviously China purchasing a lot fewer agricultural goods than was agreed. And so the administrations are really trying to separate trade from technology in Hong Kong and the like. And as long as that happens, I think the market will be able to hold that.
Evan, let me ask a 60,000-foot question. You're multi-asset. Where's the gain right now in the multi-asset? Which part is where I can be comfortable being if I'm actually trying to make a gain over the next 12 months?
Yeah, so I think, if you're really trying to make a gain, I think it's buying some of the laggards here, buying some of the things where we're seeing a genuine policy change and where there are deep valuations. So I would start in Europe, right? Everyone's hated European banks forever, but I do think we are seeing some meaningful policy changes happening out of Europe with the recovery plan announced yesterday. Obviously, we know this is going to take time to get agreed upon, but the direction of travel is clear, and the signals from Merkel, from Germany, the de facto leader of Europe, going forward towards a fiscal union is really important. So could see some re-rating there. And also, people should start paying attention to Japan. Massive fiscal stimulus coming out of Japan right now. If we're looking at monetary and fiscal combination and the power that can create for an economy, we're now finally getting it from Japan. We've had it on the monetary side, but not this strong on the fiscal side. So the deep value opportunities there to pick up.
Evan, I want to pick up on what you were talking about with the EU's fiscal response that we saw proposed, not yet passed, still facing some resistance probably from the Frugal Four. You wrote that the distribution of risks right now for Europe are poised to the upside from being to the downside earlier. Where do you see this not priced into risk assets in Europe, the idea that the EU proposal will get passed in its current form and will bleed into the region?
Yeah, so and in terms of the distribution of risk, I mean, I'll tell you, I was concerned myself about Europe when that German court ruled against the ECB, and I think it scared Merkel too, and I think that's why we're seeing this change on the fiscal side. But I think where it's not so much price is European banks. That's definitely one of them. Italian equities, extremely cheap, but I really think this is going to go a long way in people looking at the fiscal trajectory of Italy. Obviously, it's ugly, but just the signal that Europe is moving the direction saying we have your back. And to be honest, these Frugal Four, they're putting up a fight, but honestly, they don't have that much leverage when you have the four main leading countries of Europe, Germany, France, Italy, Spain behind this, and so I think that their power in driving or slowing down this debate is probably exaggerated.
Evan, you'll have to forgive me. Maybe I'm a glass half empty kind of guy, in which case I'm sorry. But Tom, how long have we been talking about this? And maybe I've just been conditioned by much of the last 10 years. There are still holdouts. Let's even say that they capitulate. The Netherlands, Austria come along with this whole plan. You've still got to wait until early next year for that capital to be deployed. Yeah. Just think about that. Every month matters right now. We're sitting here in the United States arguing about whether DC waits a month or two. Europe, even if it gets its act together, won't be able to deploy this until the start of next year.
There's no question about that, John. The timeline here, folks, is really, really, really quite something. Evan, what are your thoughts on that? How fast can Europe move?
Not fast, unfortunately. Nothing is easy in Europe, and that's why we crucially are going to rely on the ECB to form a bridge over the course of this time before we can really get things going. I think that's why we're not necessarily saying jump all in on European equities and European assets right now, because you're not going to see the speed that you're seeing in Japan right now. I mean, we are nervous about the U.S. not acting quickly enough. At least in Europe, you have some better automatic stabilizers in the background than you do, say, in the U.S. or perhaps some other regions. But the burden will definitely depend on the ECB ramping up its QE program and finding ways around these ongoing court challenges from coming out of Germany.
Evan, I love it. Nothing is easy in Europe. I will say nothing is particularly easy in the U.S. right now when it comes to reopening the economy, and that's been one of the driving issues that's been pushing stocks higher. How complicated is it when we talk about reopening at a time when people still don't know that much about the virus, the path, the spread? Where are you looking to find value amid this sort of risk on tilt with reopening still very much unproven?
It's really tricky, Lisa. I mean, we have the same kind of uncertainty that everyone does. I think we're obviously looking at all the high frequency data that Google and Apple and others are providing, showing activity gradually picking up. I think the market is liking that. They like to see things getting less bad, but clearly on a year-over-year basis, overall levels of activity are still quite depressed. So we're tracking it. We're not trying to make big predictions about it. So clearly we're seeing some improvement right here. It could stall out because reopening or not, it comes down to whether people feel comfortable. Do they feel safe going out? And I think that psychological barrier is going to take a while to get through, and that's why it's so crucial that we get a new fiscal plan coming through, so that as the private sector has this caution, the private sector always has caution after a recession, but especially dealing with an uncertain virus, that you're going to need to see on the fiscal side, consumers made whole, businesses, continued lending and support there, and most importantly, I think state and local governments, which have been on the front line of this crisis.
Evan, great to catch up with you, sir. We've got to continue that European conversation at a later date. Evan Brown there of UBS Asset Management. Tom, it has been a dash for trash, a big cyclical rotation, but the weaker parts of the equity market have really picked up. Let's just pick out one name. Royal Caribbean, I think, is up around about 25-26% in just 2 trading days, down hard on the year. But that's the kind of story that's emerged in the last couple of days. The reopening, the optimism around it, and the rotation out of the safer parts of the market, Tom, to the much more riskier parts.
I measured on one side street in Manhattan, John, and it wasn't quite back to normal yesterday, but there's no question the traffic is really rapidly getting back to normal within daytime New York City.
Big focus for this program, as is the situation over in China. Next up on this show, we'll be catching up with Jonathan Femby on the next moves you can expect around the situation in Hong Kong. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Live on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, thank you, sir. The U.S. reached the grim milestone of 100,000 deaths from the coronavirus, the highest official toll in the world. The government stop infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, said there is a good chance a vaccine may be deployable by November or December. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy.
The fear I have is as important as the data is, and it is, believe me, we are Moneyball about this, and you've got to be. We can never let it become abstract. We have got to remember that these are precious human lives.
COVID-19 cases soared in Brazil. Mexico had its deadliest day yet. Beijing has announced that they're having new national security bills for the city. It has sparked renewed protest activity inside Hong Kong. U.S.-China relations have taken another downward turn. The New York Times reports the Trump administration plans to cancel the visas of thousands of Chinese graduate students and researchers in the U.S. who have direct ties to universities affiliated with the People's Liberation Army. Live from Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg News, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants, from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Xi Jinping is a new sort of Chinese dictator. He's been throwing China's weight around in a way which is a danger to all democracies around the world, and I think he needs to be called out.
Former Hong Kong Governor Chris Patten with some really strong words earlier this morning. The situation continues to escalate in Hong Kong. The situation in the market's pretty calm. Looking at the equity market as we count you down to the opening bell in New York City, here's the price action for you. Up around about 0.1% of the S&P 500. Still up a couple of points, but we have been all over the place through much of this morning. In the bond market, on a 10-year Treasury, yields come in just a basis point to 0.67%. No big moves to speak of in foreign exchange. Euro-dollar totally unchanged. After yesterday's Chinese currency weakness today, a little bit of stability. Dollar China at around about 7.16, Tom. But quite clearly, things are escalating. What we're waiting for, and we touched on this at the top of the program, we're waiting to see what this administration in the United States does next. Because right now, that's not clear.
It's really going to be interesting to see how Mr. Pompeo and the president adapt and adjust to the reality that 2047 is here. There have been many good thinkers on this over the years. And one of the greats has been Jonathan Fenby of T.S. Lombard. He's put out not one, but a series of books on China. And one of them, of course, was a wonderful monograph, fabulous book, Will China Dominate the 21st Century? Jonathan Fenby, will Beijing dominate Hong Kong?
Well, politically, that is certainly the way we're going. The decision to put national security legislation through the National People's Congress, which was approved today in Beijing, that shows that Beijing is going to take political control, I think, in Hong Kong, delegating some activity to the local government, but definitely the national interest now predominates.
Jonathan, there has to be an objective, and for much of the last several decades, the objective was to try and shape and influence the behaviour of the Chinese Communist Party. What's the objective now in Washington?
The objective in Washington now, I think, is to accept, growing friction with China and to try to move business away from China, to undermine that economic political link which was built up after Deng Xiaoping's opening up at the end of the 1970s. And this is actually, to my mind, reflected in China, where you've got this growing emphasis on self-reliance, on absorbing pressure from the United States. And as you were saying just a few moments ago, the whole question now, I think, is how Trump moves on the basis of what Mike Pompeo gave us last night on saying Hong Kong no longer had the high degree of autonomy on which the relationship was based.
All right, so Jonathan, let's talk about next steps. There is talk about the U.S. revoking Hong Kong's special trading status.
Yeah.
And we're even hearing some leaders of the protest movement over in Hong Kong support this measure, but experts say that this will actually hurt Hong Kong and the U.S. far more than China. What's the thinking there?
Yes, it's likely to hit Hong Kong more because, of course, Hong Kong's special position between the mainland of China and the rest of the world, and particularly the United States, depends on that special status. If that is removed, if Hong Kong is subject to the same conditions as the rest of China, then Hong Kong will suffer, and a question mark will be raised over the whole American relationship with Hong Kong. So this is playing for some quite big stakes.
And Jonathan, quite clearly one of those big stakes are the commercial relationships that China and the Communist Party has with a continent in Europe. Europe has tried to sit on the fence through all of this for much of the last several years. Jonathan, in your mind, have we approached that moment, that inflection point where Europe can no longer sit on the fence and try and play both sides?
Yes, so we're moving towards that, and the coronavirus crisis has pushed in that direction. You're getting European governments having second thoughts about Huawei, for instance, including here in the UK. And I think there is. It'll take a long time in Europe, as things always do. But there is a feeling that Europe needs to reevaluate the relationship with China. This hasn't been made easier by the reluctance in Europe to get on board with Donald Trump. Europe doesn't know where the Trump administration is going and doesn't want to be in thrall to the Trump policies. But I think there's a growing feeling in Europe that they need to reevaluate the relationship with Beijing.
There's a growing fear as well that what we're seeing is a more assertive dictator, a more assertive Chinese leader in the last several weeks. Jonathan, what is happening on the border with India that you have some transparency, some clarity, some details on? Because sitting here in New York, it's hard to get the right perspective on what is happening with China, not just in Hong Kong, but elsewhere too.
Well, that's part of China. There's a whole series of things happening at the moment. The South China Sea, for instance, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Indian border fits into that. And China, I think, is going to press its border frontier claims there as well as elsewhere. So we're getting China operating on quite a number of fronts at the moment, and nobody quite knows how to deal with that, it seems. And all this is linked in with, I think, the overall desire to use the Trumpian phrase, make China great again.
Jonathan Fenby, one final question. I began my discussion with Lord Patton this morning, talking about the governor and Prince Charles looking back at Hong Kong as they went out into the Pacific Ocean in 1997. That assumes a British response to this moment. How would you suggest, or how would you recommend that Prime Minister Johnson respond to what we see between Washington and Beijing?
Well, the UK relationship with China over Hong Kong has always been a pretty difficult one to define in British terms, because Britain still wants to go on trading with China. But Britain now has to decide whether it stands by the joint declaration and the position which it thought it was in as a result of the 1997 handover agreements. And it has to define much more clearly its own position there. But I don't think that Britain should have any illusions about how much weight it bears in the present relationship.
I don't think anyone thinks we make it to 2047. Jonathan Fenby of TS Lombard, great to catch up with you. Tom, in just a moment, we'll catch up with the IMF. What's the focus?
Well, the focus without question has to be the immediacy of Hong Kong. But really, John, the focus, and this is important for Americans, the President of the United States has appointed a first managing deputy director decidedly different from the history of America at the IMF. John?
We'll catch up with Jeffrey Okamoto right here on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Together with Lisa Abravitz, we're live. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
This is a Bloomberg Money. You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids. Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
The force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it.
you have that power too.
For the first time ever, stream the complete Skywalker saga, all in one place. 9 incredible films, one epic story, only on Disney+.
The Force will be with you, always.
The Skywalker Saga on Disney+, now streaming. 18+ subscription required. T's and C's apply.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance. For our audience worldwide, we're live on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz, counting it down to the opening bell in New York, 2 hours away, with equity futures just slightly elevated, up 7 points on the S&P 500, positive around about 0.25% to 30.43 after 2 big days of a cyclical rotation. Just how sustainable is this? That's the big question. What would give this move beneath the surface, away from tech, away from growth, to the beat-up cyclical sectors? What gives it a little bit more durability? That'll be a topic of conversation for us a little bit later in the programme. In the bond market, Treasury yields relatively unchanged. Your 10-year maturity, your yield there, 0.68% on a 10-year. And in foreign exchange, we've really settled down. Euro-dollar going absolutely nowhere. Euro-dollar and dollar-yen totally dead flat. Tom, what has defined this whole period over the last several months has got to be the policy effort, the policy response worldwide. And if you were bearish, I imagine many people were converted by what we saw, not just from the Fed, the ECB, but from others too.
Well, that's true, John. And of course, we've got jobless claims coming out here at 8:30 that will be extraordinarily grim onto the June 5th unemployment report. It is our simulcast on television and radio. Lisa Abramowitz, Jonathan Ferro, and myself. And it is time where you just stop and speak to Americans confronting this policy head on. One of them is Jeffrey Okamoto, out of Pomona in computer science and at Georgetown as well. And he has taken the position for President Trump of first deputy managing director at the International Monetary Fund. Mr. Okamoto, wonderful to have you on. I must speak, as Eric Martin addressed in his article on you last week, the very different skill set you bring versus the heritage of the position for America. And that is people with Wall Street experience like John Lipsky, or maybe it's people with the right pedigree of economics like your predecessor, David Lipton. You are going to be different. In what way will you be different as a first deputy managing director representing the interests of America?
Well, thanks, Tom. It's great to be here this morning, and I'm enjoying the new format. Look, I think it's no surprise that or no shock that I do come with a different set of skills and a different background. It starts from the position that I have a lot of respect for my predecessors, knowing John and having immense respect and kinship with David Lipton, who I still talk with. But look, I think what we need now is somebody who's going to be trying to bring the world together on these critical issues. We didn't anticipate a pandemic before I started in this role. We're here now, and I think since I've arrived, we've been moving quickly to try and build relationships across institutions in the multilateral framework and also bilaterally with our key countries and partners. That's what's going to be effective in not only responding to the health side of this, but also on the economics, which for some countries is just as important or even more important.
Right. So much of this, and you mentioned bilaterally, is the new non-multilateral relationship of President Trump to the world. You're representing essentially an administration that is decidedly not multilateral. Ms. Georgieva has pushed against that aggressively. How does the United States address a multilateral institution if it doesn't believe in the underlying theory?
I think, what the U.S. wants is an effective multilateral framework, and certainly that's something that I worked on quite a bit when I was in the U.S. administration. I'm very proud to be in the current slot that I'm in now, which is trying to knit this up better and to make our programming more effective. This is a huge challenge. One thing that we've had to deal with, as I think we all have in this crisis, is move with incredible speed. So we were talking a bit about markets and market reactions, but really some of the optimism in the market is reflected in the fact that institutions like ours have moved with incredible speed and at an incredible scale.
Right.
That's unprecedented in our history.
Yeah, well, in our history, Jeffrey, the history of the International Monetary Fund is simple. They are there really as a crisis policymaker of last resort and usually offer what are considered not draconian, but very strict terms to any country that is in real need. Right now, a lot of countries don't want to deal with the former IMF regime. Can you recommend to the managing director that this needs to be a kinder and gentler IMF?
I think the conversation Crystalline and I have been having with countries is this is not your father's or even your grandfather's IMF. We are approaching the world in the context of this pandemic in a new way. A lot of that you can see in how we are provisioning our facilities for emergency finance at this point in time, which is, we're telling countries we're very frank. Spend what you have to at this point, but please keep the receipts. And we're going to be holding countries accountable on the back end for this, but we're not second guessing some of the decisions they have to make in terms of spending on critical health priorities and social safety nets.
I spoke to David Malpass of the World Bank about this question, but that was before we dragged 2047 into 2020. How will you advise the managing director, and maybe over the phone or a walk down to the Hay Adams, how will you advise the Trump administration to deal with this issue of Hong Kong?
I think my role in this, and I think our institution's role in this, is not to involve too much in the geopolitics. What we're looking at this from is from an economic perspective, and one thing that is for certain is Hong Kong is an incredibly important financial and commercial trading hub, not just to the world, but also to China and to the United States. That's underpinned by a series of policies that have been built up over time, whether it's credible monetary authority, a well-regulated banking sector, a strong reserve position. These are the kinds of things that we'll be looking at when we see about where Hong Kong is headed from here. And clearly, the outlook for Hong Kong, while it's a little unclear at this point or too early to judge given recent developments, is relevant in terms of the global economic outlook.
One of the things we know, and this is for our radio listeners nationwide and also television as well, Mr. Akamoto, we come to a point where we say, when's the next cash call on the United States? How do you observe the fiscal structure of the IMF right now? And will you need to go to President Trump and to Capitol Hill looking for more resources?
It's an interesting perspective. I think one way we look at it is a little bit different, which is we're entering into this crisis better resourced than we have in any prior crisis. And so we have $1 trillion in financial firepower that we are ready and able to deploy. That's being deployed in real time today. Right now, given some of the more pessimistic projections that we have, we think we have the sufficient resources that we need to carry out our role in this. Obviously, we are encouraged by the good amount of international cooperation that's come behind some of our recent requests for resources. For example, fundraising campaigns to help some of our poorest countries, which have gone met. So that's a good thing, and that bodes well for any future needs we may have.
Jeffrey, one final question, if I may, and this goes back to the heritage of the United States and with our economic counselors at the IMF, now Gita Gopinath there, but I'll go back to the time of Kenneth Rogoff of Harvard and, of course, to the great Rudy Dornbush of MIT long ago and far away. The fundamental difference right now in these crises, plural, is we have much more of a floating rate regime versus the fixed nature that we had in the 50s and the 60s. Give us your opinion of dollar strength or dollar weakness. Which is most efficacious for America?
I'll let the president and the Treasury Secretary speak on where they think the dollar should be at any given point in time. I think what's important here is that the Fed is doing all that it can to support financial markets, both through monetary policy and through some of its financing operations that are forthcoming jointly with the Treasury Department. This is obviously we enter into this world, as you said, with flexible exchange rates that allows flexible exchange rates to be part of the buffers that help countries weather this. For some countries, though, this is the first time they're having to use some of these tools. And so that's where our advice, paired with our, as you put it, these icons of the IMF, historic expertise and a wealth of knowledge, gets deployed on the ground to help countries in real time.
Mr. Okamoto, thank you so much for joining us today. Both Jonathan, Lisa, and I look forward to seeing you at the next actual IMF meetings, whether it's the spring meetings or the annual meeting. We look forward to that as well. Jeffrey Okamoto, folks, the first Deputy Managing Director of the IMF. John, you see how I did that? I tried to get us into the next annual meeting. I don't know where it is, Antarctica, maybe it's in your England as well, but it really speaks to the interesting new platforms that these people are on.
Yeah. I imagine it'll be Zoom, Tom. I imagine it'll be virtual. I'm not sure whether we'll get together with the IMF anytime soon down in Washington. I did think it was interesting, though, to question the role of the IMF in a moment like this, in a moment where I think countries need grants and not loans. What is the role of the IMF in a world like that, Tom? And as you pointed out, I think it is advice. It's also coordination. But on the point of coordination, I do think we need to rethink the institutions we use multilaterally around the world now. If the Chinese Communist Party is not going to adapt and change and integrate into the global economy in the way that Europe and the United States would have liked it to, what does the United States and Europe need to do? I think people would suggest they need to build out their own sphere of influence, and to do that, Tom, I would suggest if you want to achieve that, you probably need to rethink the institutions to leverage to get that to happen.
Well, not only leverage them, but as Mr. Okamoto mentioned, and Lord Patton did with force this morning, Jonathan, is the idea of bilateral and the narrowness of that versus some form of almost blockism, where the allies essentially get together to take on the new rigidities of the Communist Party. That was certainly the primal scream from Chris Patton this morning.
Well, Lisa, you've been talking about this as well, the role in Europe, and I keep beating the same drum on the issue. Europe is worried about the commercial ties with China, the Chinese economy, and the Chinese Communist Party, and for that reason,